Good evening. It's November the 17th, and you are at a double work session and a CCM. So at a double work session, we have two separate topics, and we're going to be handling them one at a time. However, for public input, the public input is 5 minutes per individual on just the work session topics. And so if you want to speak to both of them, you're going to need to look at your time, okay? And at this point in time, members of the audience shall be permitted to speak once, up to 5 minutes, on work session topics per code section 220.21C1. Anyone in the audience want to speak on either of the work session topics tonight? The first one is the Southeast Quadrant Traffic Study Final Report. And the second one is the Tax Increment Financing Incentive Proposal for the former power plant. Do we have any speakers in the public? The next time to speak will be at the CCM. Sir, come on up. Thank you.
Good evening, Paul Rowski, Avon Lake, Ohio. Excuse me, I have a cold. Getting over a cold. Clearly a big topic for us. What we're talking about is the Southeast Quadrant Traffic Study. You've done the study, you have the study. I've reviewed the study, certainly. But we as citizens asked it, and we thank you for actually spending the time and money to do it. Now that you have it, as I say, I've reviewed it. It clearly shows, no way, doesn't show anything, but opening Hanford without mitigation is an F. It creates an F, a failed intersection by state of Ohio standards. I don't know how you could ever vote to create danger. You spent a lot of money to do so, rather than just considering expediency or someone's opinion or our opinions even. You wanted data and facts, and you have data and facts. Now you have it, science, hard data. By opening now, you certainly are aware that you are creating danger for citizens. I have to tell you a story. October 3rd, I was involved in a little fender bender over in Avon. A young kid has his driver's license 7 days, pulled out, I couldn't stop. A true fender bender. I was the victim of that because he was cited. It was a Friday. Saturday and Sunday, I got 29 calls from people representing lawyers, emails, texts. Hey, but I know there's no injuries, but let us represent you. Let us see what we can do. Let's see if there's some compensation. The police report said, fender bender, no injuries. But I got all these calls. A couple more Monday, Tuesday, the letters start. Wednesday, more letters from these companies. You think that won't happen the first time that there's an accident, even a minor one? By opening without a plan to mitigate traffic and traffic volume, you're creating a huge liability for the citizens of Avon Lake. And to departing members of council, is that a legacy you want to really leave to the citizens of Avon Lake? I don't think so. We have an MOU we've talked about in the past. Certainly it shouldn't, nothing should happen as far as an opening goes until the mitigation is figured out, if it's opened up at all. The MOU says that the gate remains up till construction is complete, just as our neighbors on Liberty Roads have expected and get. We expect that to be honored until all construction is done. On a different topic, I'm a bit off topic here, I suppose, but it has to do with the public meetings. At a meeting a month or so ago, a woman made some comments that painted us, folks in current villages, wanting to be kind of a gated community, snobs, above it all. It's really not at all true. Yes, our streets are indeed privately maintained streets. We maintain the boulevard as well, which is city property. But lately, particularly since the sidewalks have opened up, we're getting a pretty steady stream of people that think our back property is a dog park. It's not, and there have been no instances on Hanford Boulevard. I live in Hanford Boulevard. Other falsehoods were stated at that meeting. We let it ride. It amounted, though, basically to an attack on us. Now, you recently passed a measure, a public comment measure, and you passed it to limit, and I understand why, the constant barrage of insults that you folks have had to receive and attacks from folks in the audience. I get it. But it goes farther than that. Madam President, in my opinion, the attacks like that fall under the limits of this public comment. You've got to keep the meeting focused. There's no point in putting citizen against citizen. I believe that we were at that point a little bit in the last meeting. So, Madam President, I humbly encourage you to listen to such commentary, and if anybody crosses the line, to do something about it. Folks, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. One of the reasons why we did go with 220 the way that we did and putting in public input at the very beginning, so hopefully throughout the meeting, and this is right now, it's a work session, that we're going to be able to answer the questions of the public. And that was the reason why we did what we did. Anybody else want to come forward on any of the two topics that we have up tonight? Come on up. Thank you.
William Zimmerman. So we've all heard about the TIF. ALERG and their salespeople have all walked in just at the buzzer because they're worried about it going through. Because as Mr. Davis says, no TIF, no deal. No TIF, no deal. Do we think that's right? Do we really think that that's the way business should be done? The way that people should be representing the city? Shouldn't have to mortgage our future for any of the property that's over there currently. Our school district is in disarray, trying to get it back together with the levies that have passed. And from my standpoint, we shouldn't be even interested in doing a TIF or property, more parkland that they said we need. I've indicated in previous meetings that we have 15% of our land already used for park space. National average is 9. San Diego's the highest at 22 or 23. And if you've ever been to San Diego, you'd know why. So why are we trying to get more park space, park land? Submerged land lease isn't included in the deal. I still don't understand why we're trying to do it this way. You know, they've made a lot of comments about the TIF and about, do we have a developer? Has one come to a single meeting to discuss this matter? Are they here today? Again, I'm starting at the beginning of the meeting. I don't get to hear the content, and yet I have to hypothesize what's going to be said with the statements that I make in advance. This is asinine. Can't make educated statements when I don't know what's going to be said. Ms. Burton-Zochner's here to present, and they were given a contract without following proper procedures here in the council chambers to get it approved. Never went to a committee, never went to a CCM, and all of a sudden it was supposed to be voted on. Mr. Shamir and Amy both voted no because they had never seen the documents before. To me, that's integrity. But the old guard just pushed it along. Had a majority of votes. We shouldn't have to pay $30 million for any land. Developers should be able to take care of the green space without contributions of a TIF. If they can't, maybe they're in the wrong business. Maybe they don't have the right plan to go forward. Maybe they shouldn't be developing the project. This is the future of our city. I've been in the city for 60 years. There are people who've been longer than I. There are many people who have been shorter than I. Doesn't make me right, doesn't make me wrong. What it really does, though, is make me be concerned. That's not going to stop. That's not going to change. We made another film another episode of Concerned Citizens that will be out shortly. Please watch.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward on these two topics we have tonight on the work session? Sir, come on up. Thank you.
Ken Yackel.
If you could wait till you're up here so the microphone can pick up. Thank you.
Right, Ken Yackel, Cassuth Drive. I'll keep my comments short. I echo Paul's comments of earlier. But one thing I'd like everybody to address when you vote on this thing, and to keep it in mind, because I think it's very valid and I think it should be kept in mind, is that the master plan, okay, that put this all forth. First of all, it's a working document. Second of all, it should have been revised years ago, okay, when the conditions under which it exists today changed. Not a little bit, but drastically. And those conditions now, okay, should, with any reasonable person who's in the position, okay, to make those changes, should not let it go forward because it's flawed, okay, as the traffic study bears out. Those streets today would never be laid out in the patterns that they are with the conditions that exist today. So don't hang your hat up, please, on the fact, well, we have a master plan and it's open and therefore it should be followed. Because to make a decision on a flawed plan is not really what you're up there to do. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to come forward on these two topics tonight? Ladies, anybody? Okay.
Lori Glenn, Avon Lake.
I'm sorry, could you say your name again?
I'm sorry.
Could you say your...
Lori Glenn.
Thank you very much.
The only thing I want to talk about is I cannot believe the amount of people that have taken down the barrier, drove through the barrier at Hanford, or driven on the sidewalk and the lawns, and nothing has been done about that. What you guys have done is you've taken the cement barriers away and you put up cones and ridiculous sawhorses with a plastic chain guarding the go-through. So it's so laughable, and I cannot believe that the people are driving through that. They're stopping their cars and taking the barriers down. They're taking the chain down so they can get through. What have you guys done? Like, this has created a terrible monster. It's made Current Village like the bad guy in all this, and we do not want Hanford kept private or kept that nobody else can go down it. That was never, I don't think it was ever anybody's intention in Current Village. Our intention was not to have the whole 983 homes that can go through onto Hanford up to Lear to turn left to get to the highway, which is, you know, they'll cut off a traffic light in 3 minutes of their time. That's the thing. I mean, I can't, I'm speaking for everyone and I don't mean to, but from what I know of my neighbors, nobody ever wanted Hanford to stay closed. Our whole intent was not to have all the traffic come through onto Hanford. All of it. There's Krebs, there's Hanford, and there's Walker, and that's it. And people are not going to be going down Walker and Krebs. They're going to do everything they can to avoid that light, because I spoke to that woman after the meeting that, you know, spoke very terribly about Current Village, and she said she wants that road open because it'll save her 3 minutes to get to I-90 to go see her mom in Port Clinton. I just don't understand, guys. And the biggest thing is I cannot believe the police have not done anything about people going through and moving the barriers. I just can't believe it. And I can't, and when they knew they were doing it, because Paul has notified council and the mayor every time, that they wouldn't put the cement barriers back up, so they couldn't just move the plastic cones and the plastic gate. You know, it's I'm really emotional, and I'm sorry I wasn't prepared to speak, but I'm just this has got. I mean, I can't sleep at night. Like I'm so worked up about this. I'm worked up that people hate like our community. That is very troubling to me. You know, like we never wanted that to happen, but you guys forced this. You guys forced this. And now you've got people from South Point and Bridgeside and everybody else coming over here and okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to come forward? Sir, come on up.
Robert Baker, Avon Lake, Liberty Rose. Wasn't going to speak until I heard the lady speak about the issues of traffic and the issues of having things removed, keeping promises, going back and forth. I do commend John and yourself and others, Madam President, for coming forward and bringing the view, listening when the barriers were removed for the 5th time against the promises that were made. I live with a cone of one of the city cones in my driveway. It's the reason why I'm speaking is because my neighbor and I have been called many obscenities. We've had to beg the administration, the city, those that have made legal decisions on this matter, to honor promises, honor agreements that this city council has said multiple times to previous and current administration. As it was said, our promises, our agreements must be followed. Legislation must be followed. Agreements that come out of planning must be followed. Agreements that come out of agreements that are made in order to move legislation forward must be followed. Essentially contracts with the public. Contracts that haven't been adhered to. When it comes to public safety, previous administration had its faults with follow through. Current administration the mayor put out a notification to law enforcement, specifically directive, advising them what steps would be taken in April of 2024. It's now, forgot what date it is. It's the 17th of November. None of those things were followed through on. The few times that we did see, my neighbor gets ticketed on a regular basis because we have to take matters in our own hands to put traffic into the lanes, into the street, so that the traffic coming off of the streets, the traffic doing illegal U-turns, including the occasional law enforcement we see, setting the example, the stop sign that doesn't get adhered to, wait till the road, should it get open. It's creating a liability. But when our administrators and our leadership give us promises, it's very discouraging to see that they're not followed through on. Or that when the odd occasion that you do see law enforcement running traffic, it's running it, come in, do the circle in the middle of the intersection, sitting at the intersection watching traffic on Lear, and 3 vehicles blow the sign right behind them, and there's nothing. The multitude of videos that I've presented to council, to Mr. Shamir, that's presented, I'm the same way. I wait for the next traffic and they test it. They regularly test it. I will say thank you for allowing me to keep the cone. I'm not directing it to you, through to him, to Mr. Liskovic for allowing the cone to stay there, because people are lazy. It has been a deterrent. The additional even before, when the barriers came down, the chain was up. It meant nothing to drivers. The extra signs, when they get there, because they don't pay attention to the first 3 signs till you get there. And repeat offenders will come through, and occasionally if I'm out front and if anything's said, it's a how do you do with one finger. So, but my biggest concern is the fact that if the past is any indication of the future, I hope it isn't. I hope as we move forward, we don't continue to make promises or dishonor agreements or send directives out and never follow through on them. One of the biggest concerns is when legislation is passed, you expect the administration, you expect those to follow your agreements, your promises, your contracts. When they don't, we really count on you to go back and make sure that they do. So thank you.
And thank you for recognizing there is a difference between legislators and administration staff. Anyone else want to speak? It's public input time. Not seeing anyone else approach, then we're going to move on then. The end of public input. Thank you. The first item that we have before us is the Southeast Quadrant Traffic Study Final Report. It's a presentation by Aaron Grillo
Silent T, really.
Grillo of GFT, formerly Trans System Corporation. Mr. Cos, this is under your committee. I'm going to move this over to you, sir, to carry it from here.
Thank you, Madam President. So just a brief background on this. This is an item that was really born out of a memorandum of understanding that the city entered into with Pulte Homes back in October of 2024. And the point of contention, as we've heard for almost a year, over a year, has been whether or not Hanford Boulevard should remain closed or should be open to through traffic. The discussion with that eventually led to a larger discussion encompassing the entire southeast quadrant, because we also were aware of some issues on Liberty Rose, and we wanted to get a full picture of what opening up Hanford Boulevard would mean, not just for that area, but for all of the areas in that southeast quadrant. The city contracted with then Trans Systems, now they are called GFT, and the largest and most comprehensive traffic study that I've ever been a part of in my time here on City Council was initiated and conducted. Mr. Aaron Grillo is here today. He has given us updates and walked us through this process from the beginning when we first contacted him back in the early spring, putting this together. And he's going to take us through the final study, the highlights of it. It's an 800-page study. We do have it available online. Is that correct, Mrs. Ross-Marin? Do we have the link for it online? The full 800-page? We'll put it on. It's 800 pages, yeah. So that's the reason we don't have a copy of it for everybody tonight. But we are going to be going over this today. I will say that, again, this is something that we started back in the spring, and with as far as the public meetings on this, and we've heard hours of testimony from people in support of and against some of the issues that initiated this study. So there are people on both sides of it, and this is not an easy decision that council will end up having to make one way or the other, but Mr. Grillo will give us the hard data and the facts, and I turn it over to him to go through this. We're going to go 30 minutes or so. Aaron, feel free to go longer if you need to. At the conclusion, council, I ask that you withhold questions until the end and let him go through and do his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cos.
Thank you. Appreciate being here this evening. So I'm going to remain seated tonight since I'm flying solo, but hopefully everybody can see the slides over here to the right that I'm going to speak to. Just very briefly, we're going to just kind of recap what our scope of work was that we've worked on over the last 6 months, provide some updates since we were here in early October. I know we provided quite a bit of information in that last meeting in terms of what we had found with the majority of our technical analyses. But today we'll provide some updates on that, and then provide a little bit of a summary out of the report that we did finalize and submit to the city late last week, and then just kind of wrap up with some next steps. So to walk through what our scope of work was, we had solicited some input from the community and the council as we were developing that scope back in the spring. That work entailed going out and collecting some existing traffic count data at a number of locations along Walker, Lear, and Krebs, and a couple of other locations off of both Liberty Rose and Hanford. We then used that information to evaluate existing traffic operations to look for locations that may have some substantial delays or non-substantial delays in the current conditions. Then we forecasted additional traffic related to the ongoing residential development, the Pulte Homes development, and then incorporated that information in with the traffic count data that we had collected to provide a more comprehensive data set to look at what we refer to as like a full build or build out condition. And we used that information to then reevaluate the traffic delays on the roadway network. From there, then we drew some conclusions to identify any potential mitigation strategies to address those delays. And then ultimately, the report is intended to provide City Council with the information needed to ultimately make some decisions about the interconnectivity at both Liberty Rose Drive and Hanford Boulevard. So there's a lot going on in this map. This is kind of a version that's actually in the report, but I figured maybe it was best to just get everything on there that labels the majority of the major streets and locations of interest for the study. So you'll see there's some number dots that go, I believe, from 1 to 20 that represent each of the locations where traffic counts were collected. Again, primarily along Walker Road to the top of the screen, so north is to the top. To the left you have Lear Road, and then to the bottom you have Krebs. So you can kind of see that quadrant that extends basically over to the Bay Village Court line. So that is our study area. And then in gray you'll see the cul-de-sac side streets there off of both Hanford and Liberty Rose that we perform some data collection at as well as part of the study. So traffic counts were performed at 20 intersections. Again, just to kind of reiterate what we were just talking about, we use that baseline information for what we call the existing conditions analysis, or no build. Then we performed some trip generation analysis and assignment for the new residential development. There were two developments that we talked about in our October presentation, primarily the 195 unit development, the Pulte Homes along Southport and Portside, and then down at the intersection of Krebs and Lear, there was a very small development tract, still I believe a bit speculative at this point, but we were given some information to incorporate that into our background data. It was about 14 homes assumed on that parcel as well. All that information then was used to perform 4 different sets of analyses looking at whether Liberty Rose and Hanford were open or closed to traffic. So we looked at both of those roads being open, both of those closed, and then Liberty Rose open with Hanford closed and vice versa. So there's 4 different scenarios that we evaluated with that traffic data. So we've got a lot of technical analysis that's in the report, and then there's a couple of qualitative items that we'll touch on as well. And then, as I mentioned, that report was submitted at the end of last week to the city. So our baseline analysis process, I'm not going to go through this table. We had similar versions of this in previous meetings, but essentially what it's here for is to, number one, remind the community that we did go out and collect data on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, as well as Saturday. So we did a pretty exhaustive data collection effort. Normally for these types of studies, it's typically just one weekday of information that's gathered. So in this case, the community, wanted to get some additional information for reassurance. And what you can see in the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday columns, those values in the table are cumulative numbers of vehicles that were counted at each of those locations on each of those days over the respective time periods. And you'll see a lot of consistency from one day to the next. So that just shows that traffic patterns are pretty reliable and consistent from one day to the next through the community. The Saturday data is much lower, but don't compare it directly to the weekday data simply because it was counted over a different time period. But ultimately, the weekdays were the more predominant occurrence of traffic. The morning peak hour was from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. And then in the afternoon, the weekday peak was from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. So hopefully those generally resonate with what you see in the communities you drive around that part of town. The PM peak period was what we'll kind of call the controlling time period. Traffic was roughly about a quarter or 25% higher than in the morning. And that's just generally because in these types of areas, traffic typically builds throughout the day. Saturday, as I mentioned, was generally less than weekdays, so our focus was really on the weekday time periods. And just to kind of sum up a point that we had touched on back in October, it sounds like a lot of homes. We talk about 195 being built. And to put that in perspective, that's going to add about 2 to 3 vehicles per minute in the peak hour. So that one singular hour, whether that be the morning or the afternoon, 60-minute time period, there's going to be about 2 to 3 extra vehicles, on that collective roadway network. So not necessarily at any one intersection, because there's many roads that go into and out of the development area, but about 2 to 3 additional vehicles per minute in that highest concentration of traffic, which would be, like I said, in that peak period or the peak hour. So in general, we've got 2 signalized intersections, Lear at Walker and Lear at Krebs. We found that both of those intersections operate quite well. We talked in October about level of service and what those delay ranges are, so I'm not going to go into detail on that again today. But essentially what we found is each of those intersections is operating well with the lanes that are out there today, with the signal timings that are in place. There's reserve capacity at each of those intersections, so if there is some additional increase in traffic in the coming years, there's capacity there to absorb that traffic and for the intersections to still operate in an acceptable manner. In addition to that, there's some flexibility in how the city may choose to adjust the signal timings and the phasing at those intersections. In particular, I believe it's up at Walker, there are right turn lanes, but there are not 5 section heads on those right turn lanes, so that's something the city could always add, to put a green arrow so that right turns can have the right of way when left turns off the opposing streets are being made. So again, I think there's a lot of flexibility that's still there within those 2 signalized intersections to make improvements if needed. But again, nothing specifically recommended at this point in time, simply because they're operating well within the acceptable levels of service. At the unsignalized intersections, so those would be your minor street, stop sign controlled intersections coming out of the residential areas and intersecting with either Walker, Lear, or Krebs. In general, the majority of those operated pretty well. I've got some other slides where we'll kind of flip through those quickly to kind of see some color coding on those results. But Hanford is probably the singular location that experiences what I would refer to as the most variability in traffic demand as it relates to the different connectivity scenarios that we evaluated. And that is in large part just due to where it is located geographically. It's largely midway between Walker and Krebs. And for that reason, it's kind of that centroid location that traffic is going to migrate to if it's open for traffic to get out to Lear, and vice versa, coming from Lear into that particular area. So again, that's the one thing that we did observe. Liberty Rose is a bit of a different situation, partly because of its closer proximity to Walker. It's not as centrally located. And we also talked in October about the tendency of traffic to be oriented to and from the south on Lear, again, trying to get down to the interchange and so forth. And as a result of that, again, Hanford being closer to the south than Liberty Rose, that's another attraction for traffic demand to want to use Hanford for connectivity. We got a question at the last meeting about the potential addition of turn lanes at some of the intersections. We had ran those warrant analyses at the last meeting. It just wasn't something we presented, so I've got a couple of slides where I'll touch on that today. Essentially, there are a few locations that are warranted under different scenarios of the interconnectivity. And then the other item that kind of falls into that category of a qualitative consideration, so kind of you set all the traffic volumes and level of service results aside, and that is one of emergency response, school busing. I believe that buses are not going into the residential areas today. They're stopping maybe out on Lear for pickup and drop off. But just another item to think about in terms of your overall decision making is going to be, in addition to the technical data, what other considerations might be important to the community in terms of having more direct emergency vehicle response, whether that means a roadway is open to traffic or it's gated but accessible for emergency responders to be able to open and to get through, particularly if another adjacent roadway is impassable for whatever reason. And then similarly, I know there's some changes that are planned with the school district. If that results in any rethink about busing and those operations, again, just something else to think about in terms of your connectivity considerations on both Hanford and Liberty Rose. All right, these may be a little bit small to see. These are appendices that are in the report. So I've got several of these. I'm just going to kind of flip through. In general, you'll see a lot of green on these. What we did on these particular graphics, and again, we talked about previously that levels of service are indicative of the amount of delay on average that a motorist is going to experience. And it's much like school grades. So levels A, B, and C in particular, and even to a lesser extent D, are relatively minimal delays. What that indicates is that it's well within acceptable parameters, especially in an urbanized area. But we did code any locations that are level of service D in yellow just to kind of highlight that. E is more transitional, meaning again it's still kind of on that acceptable range, not yet at that point of great concern, but just knowing that it is kind of in that transitional zone. And then anything you would see on the slides in red would be indicative of level of service F. For a signalized intersection, level of service F means on average vehicles are waiting 80 or more seconds to pass through there. For the stop sign controlled intersections, that threshold is 50 seconds, so a little less than a minute of delay is what that crossover point is from level of service E to F. So what you have here is based on our morning peak hour traffic counts. So this does not have the Pulte development in here. This is just looking at what we're calling existing conditions. So there's no connectivity, but there's no build out. So those additional trips that are generated by that development have not been added to the roadway network. But you'll see here, pretty much green across the board in the morning. And then this slide here, same assumptions, but this is in the PM peak hour. So you do see some orange and some yellow on here. Bridgeside and Hanford are both orange. You've got some yellow at Krebs and Dorchester, but everything else is in the green. So again, no red in the existing conditions. And then what we've done here is we've now layered on the traffic that's being generated by the residential development. So that's shown in that block there labeled as proposed site. And in this case, this is referred to as alternative 1, which means both Liberty Rose and Hanford are open to traffic. One thing to remind everyone, and this was I know asked in our last presentation, was the connectivity of Liberty Rose and Portside. In every scenario that we analyzed, the city's pavement marking restrictions at Liberty Rose and Portside are in place. meaning that intersection is effectively treated as a right turn in and out configuration from Liberty Rose, so you could not turn left off of Liberty Rose, and you could not turn left onto Liberty Rose. So that restriction further limits the amount of traffic that could actually use Liberty Rose to get over to Lear, should they have chosen to do so. So again, that's just an important distinction to remind everyone of. Whereas with Hanford, there is no restriction of that type built into the analysis. So this is the morning. You'll see quite a bit of green again. We do have an orange arrow there on Hanford again, level of service E. So again, nothing red. And then our next slide is going to be the same scenario, only for the PM peak hour. You do see here that Hanford has turned red. We've got some yellow down at Krebs, some yellow at Portside, orange at Bridgeside. But overall, again, majority of the intersections are still within the green range. And again, just to kind of reiterate, anything that's green, anything that's yellow, there's ample reserve capacity still there to accommodate additional traffic. E again is that transitional zone. Red would be indicative of what we call that level of service F, or failure or congested conditions. All right, these next two slides are going to be what we call an alternative 2. So you may see, if you look closely at Liberty Rose, there's a barricade drawn on the figure there before it reaches Portside. So in this case, Hanford remains open to through traffic. Liberty Rose is closed off. This is our AM time period, so the morning peak. You'll see majority of all the locations are green. We do have orange for level of service E on Hanford in this scenario. And then we'll go to the PM time period. So again, Liberty Rose still barricaded. You'll see Hanford is shown in red there. We've got some yellow at Dorchester and Krebs and Lear. And then we've got an orange up at Bridgeside, which I know Bridgeside had orange on a number of these. And I will point out, both Bridgeside and Hanford are unique in that there's an opposing roadway. So you've got Long Point opposing Bridgeside, you've got Teasel Court opposing Hanford. Whenever you have 4 legs to an intersection, it makes it more challenging to find that reserve capacity, because cars have one more set of movements they have to wait for the right-of-way on when they're trying to turn off of those side streets. So that's another reason why both Bridgeside and Hanford are penalized a bit more at those locations, is because of those 4th legs at those intersections. All right, so now we move to alternative 3. So in this case, Liberty Rose is open, the barricade is removed. Again, we still have the turn restrictions at Portside. Hanford in this case is closed off. This is the mornings. You'll see all green there on Hanford, green at Liberty Rose, and looks like everywhere else across the board, we've got level service A, B, or C, so all green arrows. And then in the PM time period, you will see that Hanford is orange, as is Bridgeside, and we've got yellow at Portside, Dorchester, and then the Krebs and Lear intersection. So again, now with Hanford being barricaded, that's now forcing that traffic to disperse, and use other routes for ingress and egress into this area. And then we'll move to alternative 4. So in this case, Liberty Rose and Hanford are both closed to traffic. This is the morning. So you again see green, looks like across the board. And again, this points to the statement I made when we were talking about the traffic data in general. The morning has considerably less traffic on the roadways than in the afternoon. So that's why you're seeing preponderance of green in each of these scenarios in the morning peak. It's just a lower demand of traffic in that 7:30 to 8:30 morning period compared to 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. So here in this one, you will see this is the PM peak. And Hanford is orange. Again, that's what it was in the existing condition in the PM. You've got some yellow at Dorchester, down at Krebs. Again, that was pretty consistent on some of these. You'll see Portside and Southport both being yellow. Bridgeside remains orange. So again, I think the important takeaway in looking at this is you've got a number of roadways with interconnectivity. When Hanford is closed, the folks can still get up to Walker and get down to Krebs. And nothing else has turned red, if you will. So again, there's enough roadway capacity to accommodate that dispersed traffic demand across those various points of ingress and egress to accommodate that demand. All right. So just kind of recap here. Liberty Rose, again, just in general, no concerns with how traffic is operating, whether that roadway is open or closed to traffic. Essentially seeing level of service C or better in all of the different scenarios that we looked at and talked about tonight. And again, part of that comes down to where that roadway is located geographically along Lear Road, being in the northern third of that quadrant, where we know a lot of traffic is oriented to and from the south along Lear. And then additionally with that turn restriction being imposed within the development area at Liberty Rose, really prohibits traffic from that core development area wanting to come up and make a left turn on Liberty Rose to get out to Lear. They're just not able, to do that because of that painted island turn restriction. All right. And then Hanford, a little bit more to kind of recap here. As I mentioned early on, at Hanford, there's more variability there really than anywhere else within the study area. It does incur the most delay in some of those scenarios, specifically where it is open to traffic. Now, I will kind of caution everyone, when you see level of service F, it doesn't mean that it's gridlocked 24 hours a day, right? We're talking about, 1 hour in time. We're talking about the PM peak, where it is most problematic. And, level of service F goes from, 50 seconds delay to an infinite number, right? So it is on the lower end of the spectrum. Those delays are generally, around, a minute or so in time. We did a little bit of sensitivity analysis in the report, and I think spoke to this in our meeting back in October to kind of see how an extra 10, 20, 30, 40 vehicles coming through that intersection is going to increase that delay. But even in those kind of worst cases that we were looking at with the sensitivity analysis, we're not talking about cars sitting there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 minutes of delay trying to get out. It was certainly not of that extreme, but relative to the scope of the study area, it is that one location that is experiencing some congested conditions, if you will. I know we had gotten a question in October about stacking of traffic there. How far is traffic queuing up, trying to get out, and some discussion about on-street parking and things of that nature. The queue lengths are very moderate, and even with it open to traffic, we're talking about a couple of additional vehicles waiting in line there. So if you think of that over the course of an hour, there may be 3, 4, 5 cars that are queued up. A car gets a gap, or a couple of cars get a gap as the signals change at each end. Up at Walker and down at Krebs, again, as those signal cycles happen, there's going to be platooning of traffic, there's going to be gaps. So, a couple of cars are going to turn out, there may be then a couple more cars that file in, and then re-extend that queue. So, again, from a queuing standpoint, if you're talking about an extra, 50 feet of queuing, it's not extending back through the neighborhood and blocking off access to cross streets or things like that. But it is an increase. Again, Liberty Rose, whether it's open or closed, really has an insignificant influence on what's going on Hanford. A question we had gotten after our last meeting was whether we had looked at a roundabout at the intersection of Lear and Hanford. We had not. For those of you that were here in October, we did talk about signalizing that intersection. Signal would work very, very well. However, there's not enough traffic going through that intersection to meet the standard warrant levels that would justify putting a signal in. So I know we talked through that a little bit last time. So the roundabout is kind of a, I hate to say a compromise solution, but it's one that doesn't have warrant criteria tied to it. So it's a great option in terms of safety because it does slow vehicles as they circulate through the intersection. So we did analyze that, and it worked very well as a single lane roundabout. So it would not need to be multiple lanes approached in any direction, but a single lane roundabout could be installed there. And service traffic very well, and again, kind of removes the equation any decisions the city would have to make about signalization if there was thought about considering that as a potential mitigative solution at that location. And then just to touch on this, this is just a generic stock photo here, so not anywhere in the community, but I just show it for the purpose of for those of you that aren't that familiar with roundabouts and certainly not looking at them from an aerial view to kind of see how those are laid out. So this image on the right is a single lane roundabout, so one lane entering on each of the 4 approaches to the intersection. So if you were to visualize this as Hanford, Hanford would be to the right of the screen, Teasel Court to the left, and then you have Lear Road running north-south. But what I wanted to point out is this graphic on the left, and if you are thinking about the differences between signalizing an intersection or putting a roundabout, a signalized intersection would essentially keep the kind of 90-degree angled roadways as they exist today. You may need to potentially acquire some right-of-way on each of the corners to put the signal poles in and the controller cabinet, but generally speaking, everything's pretty squared up at 90 degrees. As you look at this picture, a roundabout is a circle. Typically, your right-of-way lines are going to kind of come to a point at intersections. They're not going to be rounded. So what's shown in orange here on this graphic to the left is that if you were to put a roundabout in, there's a high likelihood that you may need to acquire some additional right-of-way on those corners in order to fit that circulatory, a circle into the intersection there. So again, that's just a visual for everyone to understand as you're thinking about what it might look like if you were to drop a roundabout in at that intersection. All right, and then last time we did not specifically talk about the turn lane warrants, so I just wanted to put a couple of slides up here. This one's on the left turn lane warrants, the next slide's on the right turn lane warrants. So much like traffic signals, there are certain thresholds or criteria available that are evaluated against your traffic patterns to determine whether or not a turn lane might be justified or needed. Now, if you think back to those color-coded arrows on the slides, we saw a whole lot of green and pretty much green all the way along on Lear, on Walker, and on Krebs. So what these turn lane warrants are doing is they're looking at whether or not a dedicated left turn lane would be needed on either Walker to the top, on Lear to the left, or Krebs at the bottom, in order to move left turning vehicles out of the way of through vehicles. So just because a turn lane is warranted does not mandate that one is installed. It just simply indicates that there is enough traffic in total that it would cross that line in terms of being warranted. So up on Walker, Bridgeside was the only location. Again, this was a 4-leg intersection there, so that kind of helps influence some of the thinking as to maybe why that intersection and none of the others through there, rising to that level of potentially benefiting from left turn lanes. And you'll see the blue dots are one of 2 different shades. The darker shade of blue meant that whether Hanford and Liberty Roads were open or closed. It didn't really matter in any of those scenarios. Those left turns are warranted. If it's the lighter blue shade, then that was not the case. That it was more limited in terms of when it might be needed. So Ridgeside being the only location on Walker. I'll jump to the bottom, Krebs, because you'll see no arrows down there, so no left turn lanes were warranted along Krebs. And then going north-south along Lear, you'll see that we've got darker blue dots at 4 locations, so left turn lanes at Country Club, Deerfield, Hanford, Teasel Court, and at Dorchester. So those locations all met warrants in all scenarios. And then up at Liberty Rose, that was a more limited situation there, whether it would be warranted or not. So again, that's just indicating that there's enough traffic activity that the warrant thresholds would be crossed for those left turn lanes. However, one thing that I believe we spoke to in the study is that I would treat that more as a safety measure. I would not run out and build turn lanes when traffic seems to be flowing well, and you don't have a strong history of crash patterns necessarily occurring. But should that be something in the future, the city picks up a pattern of rear-end type crashes, resulting in someone rear-ending a vehicle waiting to turn left, something like that. Those might be situations where you want to maybe take a closer look, but understanding that if you're going to add a left turn lane, you're obviously going to need to widen out the roadway to accommodate that additional pavement for those lanes. Right turn lanes, much fewer. You'll see there only in select situations would those right turn lanes be warranted. Along Lear, it's just there at Hanford, but you do see both at Portside and Southport where that's the case. So again, if you just kind of conceptually think about the different scenarios and when traffic is maybe going to have more limited options, and they're going to concentrate maybe more up along Walker at Portside and Southport. You can see where those right turn lanes might be necessary there. Whereas if traffic had the ability to turn coming from the south at Hanford, then a right turn lane might be beneficial in that situation there as well. All right, so we're kind of coming to the finish line here. So there's, this was kind of a high-level overview. There's a lot more detail for those of you that are interested in kind of digging into the details of the report. It is several hundred pages, though much of that is going to be the appendices that include all the traffic count data, all the different scenario analyses at 15 or 20 different locations that were analyzed in those different scenarios for the morning and the PM peak hour, but then there's some other background information on the different warrants that we just talked through, both the signal warranting and the turn lane warranting. All of that information is in there, as well as some other supporting information. So again, main takeaway, is not a whole lot to focus on other than just the variability of what may be occurring there at Hanford, depending on the interconnectivity options that are considered. Ultimately, our report is not making a firm recommendation one way or another. We're simply presenting that information regarding Liberty Rose and Hanford, and that's ultimately up to City Council to make that determination. But I think we've done a pretty solid job of trying to lay out all the information to help inform those that are going to be the decision makers when it comes to that. And as far as other recommendations or mitigations, again, we all saw just a lot of green on those slides. No other red outside of Hanford. So really, we've provided some information and some tools, if you will, for consideration down the road. But we're not coming away from this study, recommending adding turn lanes anywhere, adding through lanes, installing traffic signals or anything along those lines. Generally, this quadrant is operating, within acceptable parameters in the peak hours, and when you analyze the peak hours, then that gives you assurance that in the off-peak times, things should be operating as well or even better because there's typically less traffic on the roadway outside of those peak periods. So again, just that last bullet, we've touched in the report a little bit on signal phasing, which we talked about today. You've provided some information on the signal versus the roundabout options. Should those be considered at any point in time at Hanford? And then provided some information regarding those turn lane warrants. Though again, unless there's safety reasons, I would not advise running out and building turn lanes for no reason today. So with that, we'll close and take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Cos, I'm going to bring it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Aaron. I have a couple of questions for you, and then I'm sure my colleagues will have questions as well, too. First one, with regards to the infrastructure improvements, which would be a roundabout installation or widening the road to include turn lanes or things like that. Those are big, expensive projects. Is this the type of study that would be required to, in most cases with the state of Ohio, I'm assuming it would be with the state of Ohio through ODOT to achieve funding for it, to get grants for it? Is this what they're looking for, is a comprehensive study like we've performed?
Yes,
applying for these
yes, in
things?
general. I mean, ODOT obviously has some of their own specific requirements that local communities don't. ODOT will typically require that the traffic data is certified. That's an official process they go through to basically ratify the data for design purposes. They will typically look at a 20-year design horizon as well beyond your opening day. So in the case of, say, a development, if a development is opening 5 years from now, then they would say, we want you to look at traffic 25 years out into the future. So there are a couple of nuances, but in terms of the criteria that we've used, the software tools, things of that nature, I mean, generally speaking, all of that is typically in line with what the state would be looking for. Okay.
And then the second question that I have, and I apologize that I didn't mention this to you earlier. It was brought up to me from a resident just a handful of days ago. Much more simple. So we've got two areas on Hanford. Well, we have 2 times of the day, Hanford and Lear, where it's either orange or red during those peak times, AM and PM. This is assuming that the street is opened up. I don't know if it will be, but let's say the street is opened up and you've got the red and you got the orange at those 2 times. Would something as simple as having a sign on Hanford at that intersection saying right turn only, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. eliminate that stacking, and then that way the only people going through there would be making right-hand turns?
Yes, the delays are associated with the left turns from Hanford onto Lear. And we did some testing in the report of, left turn lane, right turn lane. The pavement's, the concrete's a little bit wide there, so I'm sure people maybe today are kind of sitting side by side, but, we looked at that a couple of different ways. The preponderance of traffic wants to make the left turn. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if you're turning right, if you think about it, if you're stopped somewhere and you're turning right, you only have to look to your left to find a gap to turn. If you're turning left, you've got to look to your left, look to your right, and you've got to look across the way at Teasel Court as well. So those left turns are kind of at the lowest bottom of the pecking order in terms of finding a gap. So if left turns are prohibited, then certainly your delays are going to go away. And I would imagine that folks would divert, and if they want to go left, go south, they're going to divert and use potentially a different point of egress, maybe going down to Krebs to get out that way.
Right. I've seen signs like that, all around where it restricts you from certain direct left or right. Usually it's left-hand turns, like you said, at certain peak times of the day. So it was brought up to me. I thought it was interesting. So
yeah, I don't know how often I've seen one of those in like a residential area like that, but certainly, yes, those are common signs that are used in specific situations to restrict during those heaviest periods of traffic travel.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Ms. Gentry,
Help me.
is your microphone on? Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Can you help me understand how, and because it seems like we have conflicting results in that we have an F, right, and over a period of time, but it also doesn't justify a signal. So what does it justify? What would the appropriate action be, other than as they suggested for that peak time?
Yes, that's where the roundabout option really came into play. So to try to take a step back, with the signal warrant, typically a signal is installed when you've got, just very heavy amounts of traffic. And so you need that established right away with the different phases to allow north-south versus east-west traffic to move in sequence. And there's kind of this gap you run into, as I mentioned, with the level of service criteria, that the scales are different for stop signs versus signals and so forth. So you are finding yourself here in a situation where I don't want to say you're in kind of that no man's land, if you will, but you are creeping into that congestion level, but it's not so bad as to reach the thresholds where a traffic signal would be warranted, if you will. So again, the roundabouts, there's no set criteria for those. Those are a great instrument, if you will, to move traffic safely and efficiently. They have their benefits. They have some drawbacks as well, as I mentioned with the right-of-way impacts. But yeah, in large part, that's what you would be facing. Now again, with level of service F and a stop sign, there's many locations where stop sign control is in place, and there's higher volumes of traffic, and delays are more than what we're seeing here. So again, I don't want to skew anyone into thinking that again it's several minutes of delay getting out, but there is going to be enough delay there that people are going to notice it. So,
Mrs. Gentry.
So follow-up question, if you're, I don't think this was part of your analysis because it'd be hard to understand. It's personal preference, I guess, probably. But as time goes on and people have determined that, oh my God, I can never get out of there, does the traffic pattern spread out?
Yes, it will. I think we talked again a little bit in October about that, and we touched on it in the report. And I think somebody made a reference to 3 minutes in travel time. That's probably about what it is to kind of circulate through the interconnected roadways to get down to Krebs. But you could definitely do that, and we did do a sensitivity analysis. And if I think we had some crazy number about like 300 or 400 cars. If that number of cars wanted to work its way down to Krebs and turn right to get over the signal to then head south on Lear, that stop sign control could handle it, again, because everybody's turning right out of the subdivision onto Krebs. So, yes, it's human nature, right? You may make that mistake once or twice and sit in traffic, and then, next time you say, I'm going to try a different way and see if it's quicker or easier. And sometimes you may pick a route that's longer in time, but you're moving. And at least I know for me, I would rather be moving than be sitting in traffic. So again, some of that's just going to come down to personal preference, navigating through the neighborhood.
Ms. Gentry,
Okay,
continue.
thank you. And so, sorry, I was trying to figure out the notes on here. That's okay, you can move on. If I can find another.
Mr. Shamir. Can you turn your mic on, please?
Of course. Is there any way that I can access the overhead?
We're going to switch.
I can either share it or I can plug in, whatever you like. Because I have a map which I'd like to go through.
I'm happy to disconnect here if that would be helpful.
Just a moment. No,
It's
no.
not really advisable, I'm sorry.
we-
Okay. You need to go through this one.
If we
Can
could,
we unplug the meeting, the Zoom meeting, we'll have issues getting
okay. I'm so sorry. We have another meeting following this one. And so, Mr. Shamir, you're going
Can
to be
I
able.
plug into yours to where you're situated?
I'm going to ask Stephanie. Stephanie, could you come back, please? Stephanie? That'll work? Very good. Thank you.
Do you want me to disconnect then?
Yes, right there. Thank you, Mr. Shamir, for being so patient and accommodating. And then, Mr. Shamir, for the audience to pick up your voice, if we could have you and Aaron, if Aaron could take a seat back to sit where Aaron is, That way your voice will come across the microphone and the streaming audience will be able to hear. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, doesn't seem to.
Is it showing on your screen but not up here?
Yep.
That's what happened to me as well. And she had to have me actually start my presentation in presenter mode.
It is in presenter mode.
Is it extending your screen instead of
Yes.
duplicating it? Okay, so under settings, so
Steffi, can you come up real quick for that? We'll take care of it here. Just, she's coming up now, Mr. Shamir. So fortunate to have these talented IT people with us. Sorry about that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie? Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
the
Shamir,
question.
if you could just give her a moment.
Sure thing.
Okay, sir, you may go ahead. Thank you.
I guess the question that I want to focus on is the new Learwood School, which effectively is going to be at the location up there identified as A. That new school is going to roughly have 1,100 students. So it's going to double in number in about 2 years' time. So the fundamentals of busing beyond 1 mile radius is what I was told by the school district is going to apply here. So if the decision is made that busing will not occur within the 1 mile radius, in the full area, we're looking at roughly 3 square miles of residents that will be taking their kids to school. If it's only north of Walker Road, we're looking at roughly 2 square miles of residents that would be taking their children to school. And, you know, the concept of walking to school may fly as the weather is nice, but as the weather turns a bit cold, snowy and cloudy, I think that number is going to increase. And we've had this discussion at the beginning in March, and again when we were going through the iteration, that without looking at Learwood Middle School 2.0, it is very difficult, at least for me, to envisage the validity of the study as it pertains to our future. And I know that when you look at the area, it may not look such a great number of people, but a lot of folks live from Walker Road up to Lake Road within the West Winds all the way into Ward 2, and a lot of them have children. So this is something that I think needs to be addressed. And if it includes the area south of Walker Road in the no busing zone, then all those residents would be coming out either Liberty Rose or Hanford, hanging a right, going up Lear to get to that school. So the congestion, again, needs to be addressed. It is, I think, the validity of the study as far as the city would be concerned for planning purposes is questionable if you don't take into account that piece of information which is out there. I mean, 1,100 students is a considerable number of students that are going to be increased. And within a 2 mile radius, when you look north of Walker Road, it's still a significant area with a number of homes. And if you want to look at the area south, that 3 square mile plus all those new residents. So if you guys can tell me how that is going to be addressed, because as people come out of the West Winds to take their kids into Learwood, Walker will get congestion. As people are traveling eastward to get to Lear, the congestion will increase. So then you may have people that are either cutting south to get to Krebs or getting into Liberty Rose and Hanford. And I'm just wondering how that was addressed in this study. Thank you very much.
Yes, I believe I was posed with a similar question
Yes.
in October, and I'll kind of restate the same
Do you
thing.
need this still, or should I?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll restate what I believe we talked about in October, which is the school is, as I understand it, doing their own traffic study, or will be doing their own traffic study. The information that we've gathered and presented in our report is certainly valid information that can be a building block and serve as a foundation for that study as more information is known about the timing of that school coming online, as well as the servicing options and how that traffic is going to be integrated into that new school. So I have no other additional information to share, unfortunately, since that was not included in our scope of work.
Thank you, Mr. Schmier. Anything else, sir?
Just
No?
one more thing,
Go ahead.
actually. So when we talk about a roundabout, are we talking about a roundabout within Hanford or somewhere else? And I just want that for clarity's sake.
At the intersection of Lear and Hanford.
Okay. Now, when it comes down to residents of Schiller Court and Yeager, so that is how this whole program evolved. Residents at those two streets have a hard time making a left turn and getting onto Hanford to travel onwards via Lear Road. Now, this is at the current condition. Now, when the traffic opens up, I mean, I could understand if there was a roundabout for them to come out, hang a right, go through the roundabout, and then come back through Hanford going towards Lear. But fundamentally, as it sits today, I've sat at both of those streets in the early hours of the morning, and it's very difficult to make a left-hand turn. So is that considered in this study?
So I believe we looked at each of those locations, we counted there. Again, the data within the criteria that we looked at showed that things would operate within acceptable thresholds. We did not evaluate roundabouts, along Hanford itself, but that is certainly something that the community could consider, even just a mini roundabout. It wouldn't need to be a full scale like I showed in that picture. There are certainly smaller, circles that can be put in those areas to help mitigate those left turn problems by allowing people to make what we call a legal U-turn, if you will, because you can make the right. So that's certainly something you could look at, probably within the footprint of the roadway that's there today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gentry, do you remember what you were going to say?
No, it's fine.
Okay, I'm going to move on then. Mr. Arnold, anything at this point in time? Sir?
Yeah, actually, I do have one question here. We didn't see kind of an up-close look of Hanford Boulevard, but how there's one ways coming in and out of Hanford. And would you suspect, if it does get opened up, that people in essence, is that road wide enough that you can maybe in the right-hand side of the road, that people could turn right, and if you're turning left, you can turn left?
Yeah, that's what I kind of alluded to. Is I believe it's concrete pavement there, and it's not quite two standard lane widths wide, but it's wider than one lane width wide. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if folks are typically maybe slipping by. If somebody's waiting to turn left and people are making a right. So yeah, it's probably something that could be looked at and either striped that way, or some very minor modifications could be made to accommodate that.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Nothing.
At this time?
Nothing.
Thank you. I do have a couple things. While we're talking about what Mr. Arnold brought up, has there been any consideration of removing the median in the center of Hanford. Would that help with the traffic flow? Right now, it's like a boulevard where there's a section.
Yeah. The median really doesn't have any direct influence on the operations that we're discussing here today.
Okay.
I suppose if there was a question of restriping the pavement and widening the travel lanes, then maybe a narrowing of the boulevard could always be a consideration. But I don't know that removal would have any influence there.
Thank you. This was not numbered, and because your screen is now down, I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. Are the numbers on here, 1, 2, 3, and on, are those in order of traffic flow? So number 1 has the most traffic coming through it?
No, those were just numerically assigned, I believe, to coincide with the reference of the information in the report.
Okay, I'm going to move on then, thank you. Your analysis process, this screen? Okay. Public can see what I'm looking at. How do we know what direction the traffic is traveling in? For example, Walker Road and Lear Road has the most traffic of all, right? But how do we know which way they're traveling? Are they traveling east-west, north-south?
We had some slides in October where we had some flow arrows, and those were diagrammatically adjusted.
So it's the very same ones that we had back in October then?
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
this is just a more tabular representation, what we call a heat map, that essentially shows red and orange are at the locations with heavier volumes of traffic, green is lower volumes of traffic.
Okay, and with this in mind, because we've talked about timing, would it be of any difference if we change the timing only to the PM on the 2 intersection lights that are there now at Krebs and Walker and Lear?
You're asking if operations would change at the
Correct.
2 signals by changing the timing?
If we were going to change the timing, because that was one of the options that you gave us, at night for 1 hour or for 2 hours, whatever it's going to be, the peak at night, would that assist? Would that help with the flow?
Yeah, there's some opportunity to adjust. Again, we didn't recommend any specific changes because things are still operating well, but at Krebs in particular, because we did see some, I believe, yellow arrows there, there could be some reallocation of the green time for some of the phases to perhaps rebalance amongst the 3 approaches to the intersection.
Okay,
Yes.
and it was stated when David asked the question, everybody asks really good questions about ODOT grants. I'm thinking more of NOACA grants. With this particular study, could it be used in applications for NOACA grants that Mr. Liskovic would be applying for?
I guess there's lots of different grant programs available, so I guess I'm not sure exactly what program through NOACA would be pursued.
Transportation grants that they have.
But, again, typically the information we have is going to provide a good baseline for that. You'd have to look at the specific requirements of each grant.
Okay.
And one thing I will mention, going back to the question about ODOT funding, is safety funding is one of the best programs that ODOT has available. Safety was not a big driver here in terms of crash history, but that would be something that I would certainly encourage the city to do a more in-depth analysis of if you were exploring that as a potential funding program in the future.
And I'm almost done, thank you. All my questions with you are finished, but now I have a question for Mr. Cos. So, Mr. Cos, what is your intention at this point as chair of the committee?
So tomorrow, the Public Safety and Health Committee meeting will meet, and we will discuss tonight's meeting and the report that's been given to everyone. And I'll mention this, that Mrs. Rossmarin has indicated to me that the full 800-page, the link to that will be available on the city website under the Safety Committee agenda. If not today, then tomorrow for sure. So it's there now? Great job. So all 800 pages is going to be there. So the idea is that the committee will meet tomorrow. We will discuss this, and it is my hope that a recommendation, one way or the other, comes out of that committee, and that we go on a process of 3 readings to either keep things as they are, remove things, or have some variance in between and modified. But I will let the committee have that discussion tomorrow. But that's kind of the plan, is move it out of committee tomorrow and then have council weigh in through 3 full readings with whatever that recommendation is.
Thank you, sir. And for everybody's edification here and at home, The meeting's at 5:30 in the chambers, correct, sir?
That is correct, right here, 5:30.
Very good. One last time. Yes, Mr. Zuber?
So that means that we can expect this on next week's agenda
Yes,
for first reading?
yes, that's correct. Because it comes out of committee. Thank you, sir. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much for your time. At this point in time, we're going to move on to our second work session. That has to do with the tax increment financing incentive known as the TIF proposal. Majid Maghlouf with Burns, Ochner, and Greenberger is here, and we also have some other consultants through Zoom. Todd Davis is through Zoom. Okay. And we're going to have a moment of changing our IT around. We'll be right back with you. Hello, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, can you hear us? Mr. Davis, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay, just a second. I saw his mark. Mr. Davis, could you say something again, please? Now we can hear you. Thank you. Okay. Majid, whenever you're, oh, no, Mr. Arnold, this is yours, out of your committee, sir.
Thank you. Over the past 3 to 4 weeks, there's been,
If we could have attention in the audience, please. Thank you.
no, I was just going to say that the purchase agreement of the power plant, 23 acres, is up for third reading next week. So over the course of the last 4 weeks, we've had Todd Davis come in and talk to us about the purchase agreement. Then we had Steve Gross come in and discuss the environmental aspects of the property. And today we have Majid Maghlouf of Burns, Ochner, and Greenberger LLC here today to talk about the TIF. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council President, Councilman Arnold, and members of council. You have the luxury tonight of listening to one exciting presentation about traffic engineering, followed by yet another exciting presentation about TIFs. So, it's true public service to sit through all these presentations. But as you know, I'm going to talk about TIFs, the purpose of TIFs, how they operate, and as much as we can about how they would operate in this scenario. TIFs, and you've heard me talk about TIFs before, are tax. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. Tax increment financing. It's an economic development mechanism to finance public infrastructure improvements. It effectively, and you've heard me talk about the increment before, it locks the taxable worth of real property at the value it holds at the time the authorizing legislation is approved, and then it captures the payments derived from the increased assessed value of the improvement beyond the locked amount toward a separate fund to finance the public improvement. And I'll go more in depth as to how that works and what that means, but I thought it would be a good idea to compare what a TIF is to real property tax abatements, because I think sometimes these concepts get confused, tax exemptions, tax abatements versus a TIF. We do have programs for tax abatements in Ohio. There is the Community Reinvestment Abatements Program, the CRA program. There is also the enterprise zones that came out as a result of some federal legislation. And these programs effectively eliminate the property taxes on a property or an area for a period of time to encourage development. So you may say for 15 years there will be no real property taxation on this area. That's complete abatement of taxation. You see it more in distressed communities where they have CRAs that are very prevalent and very common. But the idea is to incentivize the development to come in, and there would be no payment of taxation for the duration of the CRA. Tax increment financing, on the other hand, is a tool to capture the increased property tax revenue from new development to fund the public infrastructure improvement. So a TIF does not increase and does not abate the existing taxes. Whatever taxes existed on the property prior to the enactment of the TIF does not touch them. The TIF only captures the gains on the taxation that result from the development itself. Those revenues would not be in place if the development doesn't happen. But if the value that the city collects prior to the development continues unabated and untouched by the TIF. Now, the Ohio Revised Code, when we use it to finance public infrastructure. The Ohio Revised Code has a very broad definition of what qualifies as public infrastructure, and it's a very long definition, but it includes, but is not limited to, roads and highways, water and sewer lines, the continued maintenance of those public roads and highways and water and sewer lines, environmental remediation, land acquisition, including land acquisition in aid of industry, commerce, distribution, or research, demolition, including demolition on private property, when determined to be necessary for economic development purposes, stormwater and flood remediation projects, including such projects on private property when determined to be necessary for public health, safety, and the provision of gas. So you get the idea in terms of how broad the definition of a public infrastructure is that you can use a TIF for. And I know Avon Lake has not had a lot of historic experience with TIFs. But I think it's important to remember that they are very prevalent throughout Ohio. So Ohio has approximately 1,850 active TIFs, according to the Ohio Department of Development as of today. And those are just the active TIFs. Those are not the TIFs that have already reached the end of life experience. And you can see in Franklin County, they have 364 TIFs. In Summit County, you'd think actually I was shocked to see Summit County has more than Cuyahoga County, but Summit County has 300 active TIFs. Cuyahoga, 251. Hamilton County, 235. Claremont County, 134. Lorain County, 83. Delaware, 80. Licking County, 58. Again, these are samples. This is not the entire, I didn't go through 88 counties, but these are samples that shows you the prevalence of TIFs in Ohio. If anybody's interested, actually, you can go on the Data Ohio that's compiled by the Ohio Department of Development, and you can find every one of those 1850 TIFs. And you could look by county, and you'll see how each county, how many TIFs it has on those TIFs, and when they were adopted, and the amount of the duration of the TIF and the life of the TIF. I don't know if you can see I tried to do a screenshot of Lorain County, and it only captured the first 5 of the 83. Obviously, you have to keep scrolling down. But I thought, the very first example, which is the newest one, that Avon just did for Nagel Farms. And I don't know how familiar, I presume council is familiar with Nagel Farms in Avon. But basically what Avon did is they had the opportunity for a development of 35 residential single-family homes. And they used it as an opportunity to do a TIF district for 70 acres to try to incentivize development. Start with the 35 and use that as the opportunity for future development for the 70-acre area. And that is a brand new TIF that was just enacted in September of 25 and is with the Ohio Department of Development. There is I think Petrus Homes is doing the development, but it's Tom Calaris is the developer on that project. Now, how do you do the value of exemption on increased value and the school district approval? Under Ohio law, you're allowed to have the duration of the TIF, the life of the TIF, up to 30 years, and to exempt 100% of the increased value. Again, it's critical when you see the term 100%. We're purely talking about the increased value. You always have to remember that the base value that without the development was there is never touched. A TIF never touches the current existing taxation on the property. It only touches the taxation on the increased assessment as a result of the development. So even when we're talking 100%, we're not talking about touching the base in any way, shape, or form. Now, cities have the authority to do taxes on their own without involvement of the school district, without the approval of the school district, if you either make the school district whole. In other words, you could do it for 100 years, for 30 years, 100%, but you keep the school district whole is in the sense that you let the school district collect what they would have collected otherwise. So that you don't need the school district approval because they're not impacted. It's just the taxation is just converted into a payment in lieu of taxation pilot, but they're still getting the same payment. Or you can do up to 10 years and 75% of the increased value on your own without the approval of the school district and touch this. You can take that much of the school revenue without the school district's approval. Let's talk a little bit about the public process to create a TIF. And again, I apologize, these slides are coming too small to see on the screen, but it is a very open and long process. So council, there is an introduction of the ordinance to declare the public infrastructure improvements to be a public purpose necessary for the development of certain parcels. That ordinance has to meet certain requirements. It must specify the life of the incentive district, the percentage of the improvements to be exempted, the public infrastructures to be made, and it must identify one or more projects being or to be undertaken in the district that place the additional demand on the public infrastructure that would necessitate the enactment of the TIF. Council, as the legislative body, has to conduct a public hearing within 30 days before adopting the ordinance. There is no emergency way out of this public hearing. There is no waiver of the rules. There's no way to avoid that public hearing. That public hearing has to happen, and has to happen within 30 days of the enactment of the TIF ordinance. Council has to provide notice of the hearing at least 30 days in advance to the impacted property owners by mail. So there's the regular notice that the city would go through, whatever you do on your website and a newspaper for your public hearings, but you also have to provide notice for the property that's impacted by the TIF. Also, there is a duty to provide notice to the Board of County Commissioners of what you're doing at least 45 days in advance of enactment of the ordinance. So there is notice requirements that go to the county. There is notice requirements to the property owners. There is a public hearing that has to happen before the TIF ordinance is adopted. And I think it's critical to understand that this entirely happens through the council, through the open public process. I think sometimes there's been the confusion, people thinking that the administration can do this on its own, or the intent here that the administration can do on its own. The interim development agreement was very clear that all the administration was committing to do was to advocate for it, to bring it before the council, to ask for it. But the decision under the interim development agreement, under the purchase and sale agreement, and without regard to any of these agreements under Ohio law, is the council's decision. And obviously, in this case, because the TIF would impact the school districts has to go through its own process for the approval of the compensation agreement that would come out of it, and approval of the TIF even, but then whatever compensation agreement that they negotiate out of that TIF. Now, what we've done, if you think of it, is we've abated, for the lack of a better word, the taxation on the increased value, increased assessed value. But just because it got abated doesn't mean that it's not collected. What the city does, and this entire thing, by the way, has nothing to do with, I think often people think of it as sort of you're abating the taxes because you don't, you're giving a giveaway to the developer or anything of that nature. The developer still makes the exact same payments. The reason this entire structure exists, where we abate taxes and then you make payments in lieu of taxation, is the Ohio Constitution has a prohibition on pledging tax revenues in support of economic development projects. So what the Ohio legislature did, they said you abate the taxation and then you make a payment in lieu of taxation. Now this is legally treated as not tax money. It's money that the developer is making under an agreement. It's a payment in lieu of taxation, and then you're able to pledge it for debt for economic development. That's the only reason I think why often people that's the only reason why this abatement even exists, is to basically convert that money from tax revenue to non-tax revenue to be able to pledge it in support of the debt. But we're talking about the exact amount of money. And what the revised code says that a municipal corporation that has declared an improvement to be a public purpose may require the owner of any structure located on the parcel to make annual service payments in lieu of taxes to the county treasurer on or before the final dates for payment of real property taxes. Each such payment shall be charged and collected in the same manner and in the same amount as the real property taxes that would have been charged and payable against the improvement if it were exempt from taxation. Again, we're doing the exact same thing here that we do every day with the local government fund at the state level, right? Because if the city directly collected the taxes, you wouldn't be able to pledge them. The state collects the taxes and then sends them to the money, then they're not considered taxes for purposes of expenditure by the city. The casino tax revenue is the same way. That's why it's collected at the state level and then sent down to avoid it being considered tax revenue when you pledge it. All of it is purely to deal with the prohibition in Article 8, Section 13 of the Ohio Constitution on pledging tax revenue for development. So the revised code goes through all these ways to convert tax revenue into non-tax revenue so that you could pledge it for bonds. But as far as the developer is concerned, they're still making the same payments into the pilot, the payments to the treasurer, to the county treasurer. And what happens is then you monetize those payments, those revenue. Remember, we went through this entire process to abate the taxes and convert the tax money into non-tax revenue so that you can monetize it and pledge it in service of bonds. And revenue bonds are issued and the pilots, now they're not tax revenue, they're pilots, are used to service debt on the revenue bonds. In the case of the interim development agreement and what Avon Lake did is it set certain guardrails in this process. And Avon Lake said we will not act as an issuer of revenue bonds or any bonds. So we will not issue the bonds. We will not issue the debt. We have the ability to issue it. We're an issuing authority. We can issue all kinds of debt, but we will not issue the debt here. The second and more important provision is Avon Lake said that we will not pledge our full faith and credit to secure the debt. So the city is completely not on the hook for that debt, for any shortfall or anything of that nature. And the limitations in the development agreement, the interim development agreement that carried through to the purchase and sale agreement, is there is a limitation on the amount of the TIF revenue that is used to finance the purchase of the park, and those cannot be changed without the city's approval. So let's talk about how debt will be issued. And the way that it will happen is the city creates a special fund to receive the pilots collected by the county treasurer. That money is kept with the city. There is a third party that will issue the debt. In this case, it's anticipated to be the Port Authority. But again, there's other authorities that can issue the debt. But it's not going to be the city of Avon Lake. A third party will issue the debt. There is, again, the names of the agreement, don't pay too much attention to the name of the agreement. Some people use cooperative agreements, some people use development agreements. Whatever you call an agreement doesn't matter. It's what the agreement does. What are the deliverables under the agreement? But typically there is a cooperative agreement between the city and the third-party issuer, in this case the Port Authority, to direct payments from the city TIF fund, the fund that we create in the city to receive the money from the treasurer, to the trustee to service the debt. There will be, when the debt is issued, there will be a trustee, for instance, Huntington Bank, or somebody that will be the trustee who will make the payments to the bondholders, and basically the city would transfer the money from that specific fund to the trustee. Again, this is a very critical point because that does happen sometimes. Sometimes when you go to issue the debt to have favorable interest rates, there will be what's called a guaranteed minimum service payment. That no matter what happens, the bondholders will receive the service payment on this date continually without interruption. And somebody has to guarantee that service payment. Avon Lake has made it very clear that it will not step in to guarantee that service payment, nor will it put its full faith and credit behind that service payment. So if there is a guarantee necessary for any shortfall, and where that really would come in is, let's say that the pilot payments come in short, they're less than what we were anticipating, the city is not on the hook for anything. The city's sole role in the bond financing is effectively limited to receiving the pilots, depositing them in that city fund, and then sending them to the trustee for the trustee to make the payments. If the amount is short, that's not the city's issue. When the bonds are issued, some other arrangement has to be made for it, not through the city. So what's left after council's action on the purchase and sale agreement? And I think the public engagement process is literally barely starting. I think that's sort of, sometimes people think that we're sort of, just because we're acting on the purchase and sale agreement, we've reached the end point. But once there is an agreement with the school district, council has to review and approve the TIF ordinance which still has, as we talked, the 30-day notice requirement, the public hearing, all of that stuff that has to go through for the enactment of the TIF ordinance. Council will have to review and approve the zoning ordinance for the creation of the overlay district. That will involve a review and recommendation by the Planning Commission. It will involve a public hearing before the City Council for the adoption of the overlay district before it is adopted. There is very much the interim development agreement, and almost you can't do a development of this nature and this kind of level without a development agreement that will happen with the ultimate developer. And the city and the council will have to review and approve any ultimate development agreement. Again, we talked about how this money will come into the city fund and then go from the city fund to the Port Authority or any other issuing authority. There is a cooperative agreement that will have to be reviewed and approved by the city. And obviously, the development itself, right, under the overlay district, there is a certain process for the review of the proposal, of the site plan, of the there is an entire review of the actual development by the Planning Commission, by for the overlay district, for the development, the approval of the development, any deviations that are necessary, whatever it is, will all happen in an open meeting. So, a couple of frequently asked questions. Will the public be protected and have a say? I think we just went through the protracted public process that we have to go through after the approval of the purchase and sale agreement. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. The city will not be pledging any of its revenues or collections or anything in favor of the debt. This is not an insubstantial issue, which shows you in terms of the private developer, or somebody has to there could be some opportunities with port authorities, depending on which port authority does this, to pool revenue funds together, to limit the risk, but a minimum service payment is not an unheard of thing in these kinds of developments. And when you talk about having skin in the game, that's something that a developer will have to have skin in the game for the guarantee of the minimum service payment. Just to give you an example, I'm trying to remember which project it was. I think it was two projects. When I was in Cuyahoga County, the law director in Cuyahoga County, we had two projects in Cleveland. One was the redevelopment of the Westin Hotel, or that property into the Westin Hotel. And I think the other one was with the casino. And you can imagine the amount of revenue that either of those projects generates. And one of the things that the county did to incentivize the work to happen was pledge. It wasn't issuing the debt. It wasn't directly involved in the projects. But the instead of giving money into the project, what it did is it offered its full faith and credit to put it behind the TIFs. It went through a very thorough analysis to make sure that there was enough pilots to be secure, but it offered it as a service where it offered its full faith and credit to back those revenue bonds. So it shows you even projects of that size, the county stepped in and did it, even though it wasn't a county project. Another frequently asked question. Does tax increment financing on a property raise property taxes of surrounding properties? And I think the simple answer is no. The tax rates the TIF has nothing to do with the tax rate. So the tax rates are completely not changed. It simply captures the increase in the tax revenue resulting from the development. Now, what could happen and what is hoped to happen is the development would increase the values of the surrounding property. That's part of the reason why you do them. And then you end up collecting more real estate taxes because of the increased valuation of the surrounding properties, but it's not because of any increase in the rate of taxation or anything that the TIF is directly doing. Again, I wish I had a foresight to realize how small these boxes would come on the screen. They looked really nice on my screen and the computer. Does the city lose taxation with a TIF? Again, we talked about how a TIF is different from a traditional tax abatement or exemption. It doesn't change the tax rate. It simply captures the taxation on the increased value resulting from the development itself. If there's no development, there's no tax, there is no increased assessment to capture. Once the period of the TIF ends, the collections return to regular taxes. So again, these are developments that are anticipated to outlive the life of the TIF. And then once the life of the TIF is finished, you go back to regular taxes. And again, the primary reason why many cities and others do this is because of the other benefits that come from a development of this nature. Again, we talked about this the last time I was here. Cities tend to be not the biggest beneficiaries of real estate taxation. You know, it's income tax, it's sales tax, it's other kinds of taxes. So when you bring that many residents into your community, the level of income taxation that the city would receive, if they're doing activity in the city and purchasing and sales taxes come in, that's part of the reason why cities incentivize these developments. And I think it's critical not to forget that a development of this nature and a TIF of this nature actually enables the school district to collect revenue that would not have been there. So if you need that TIF to enable the development, and the school district negotiates a compensation agreement where it receives certain revenue out of the pilots, that is revenue that the school district did not have but for the development. There is reason why there is, hundreds and hundreds of these developments involving school districts throughout Ohio, and why school districts engage in them, because they realize they benefit from it indirectly. They benefit from the community improving, from the other property taxes coming in higher. They benefit from whatever they can negotiate out of the compensation agreement itself. There is a benefit to the school district often, which is why they engage in the negotiations and they do a compensation agreement. Can't the city acquire the park through rezoning instead of creating a TIF? So this is something that we actually gave quite a bit of consideration to at the very beginning of this process. There is very clear precedent by the U.S. Supreme Court, which is, it's called exactions, which means you cannot, as a condition of zoning approval, require property interests from a property owner. That's a taking. Effectively, you're exercising eminent domain that you'd have to pay compensation for it. In fact, that case law is the reason why the development agreement was born, right? So that you could negotiate those kinds of agreements with the developer where they can voluntarily contribute those things to the city as opposed to the city being able to force it. The case that made it to the U.S. Supreme Court was, I believe it was in Colorado, where you lost the case when the Supreme Court talks about this poor old lady, going before the city for, but effectively, I think she was before the Planning Commission or Board of Zoning Appeals for some kind of a variance. And as a condition of the approval, they required her to give an easement to the Metro Parks for that development. and the Supreme Court said, you can't do that, that's an exaction. That is unconstitutional, that's a taking of property. Now, I think there was a reference to the Ohio revised code provisions and subdivision regulations, where in subdivision regulations, or even in zoning regulations, we could have requirements for open space requirements for, but that's different than the city actually owning a park. There is the dedication of the public improvements, but when you think of the dedication of the public improvements, what you're doing there is effectively having the city buy the liability for the long-term maintenance of those improvements. You know, the roadways dedicated to the city, the utilities are dedicated to the city, and the city is undertaking the long-term improvement and maintenance of those things, and they are the very improvements that enable the development to happen. We even thought about the possibility of not conditioning anything. I think our initial thought was going to be just create an overlay district, and the overlay district only applies to properties that abut a certain park with X param. You know, if you abut a park with X number of acres with X number, then you can take advantage of the overlay district, and then the developer would have to decide whether, you know, they would have to create the park and dedicate it to be able to qualify to take advantage of the overlay district. And if you think of the reality of doing something like this, you're effectively asking the developer, without any assurance that just to be able to apply to take advantage of an overlay district. They have to create a park, take the entire expense of creating a park, donate it to the city, have the city accept it as a public park without any guarantees, without any nexus to what you're doing, and then only then be able to apply for an overlay district that abuts that park. We've truly analyzed this thing in any way, shape, or form in terms of how the park can come, and there is no realistic way to do that. Especially when you're talking about a site that begins with a brownfield. And so, you know, the development of that park includes environmental remediation in any kinds of improvements on the park before you even can apply for the overlay district. It doesn't work. And I think we're really forgetting something that you know, I think there is the assumption that there are things in this life that are free. That doesn't exist, right? So let's say we did that, and we made it you know, to qualify for the overlay district, you have to abut a park of certain acres. And do we truly believe that the ultimate TIF for the remainder of the development would have not recaptured that money under some other? Money's fungible in some way or another. It would have been captured in one way or another. The city's just being much more transparent here in terms of what that acquisition cost is, what it means, as opposed to being buried in a budget at the back end of a TIF agreement. It's doing it up front, and it's gaining site control where it can have control over the environmental remediation, and it can have the site to do all of that. So it really is the most transparent way of doing it versus backdooring it, and then at the end of the day, you're still paying for it without any disclosure. It's just buried as part of the development cost somewhere else. And again, we saw that the demolition costs are part of the public infrastructures for which a TIF qualifies. The acquisition of property is part of the TIF. So it would have come in, you know, you would have had to pay for it indirectly, no matter what. This is another question that came up, is if the TIF doesn't happen here, can the city walk away from the purchase and sale agreement? Is there anything in the purchase and sale agreement that shows that? And by the way, I think the PowerPoint can go to all whoever needs it. It's a public record at this point. Anybody can have it. So you can read these slides much better than what I'm looking at. But I've given you the provisions from the, actually through Todd Davis, from the purchase and sale agreement that clarify that issue. So you have section 3.01, which says, as a condition to closing, the parties agree that the TIF revenue under the interim development agreement shall be monetized to provide funding necessary to pay the purchase price. So that's a condition to closing, that the TIF has to be there monetized for the closing to happen. So if the TIF doesn't happen, the closing doesn't happen. You have other provisions relating to the closing date and the requirements for the closing date, all of it being placed. The money has to come, right? So the money has to, and it's only being paid for by the TIF. So the TIF has to be in place. And the city has, I think Todd Davis spoke about this quite a bit when he was before the council, is the city has some very broad due diligence exit provisions here in terms of being able to exit for during the due diligence period. So that is another opportunity for the city to exit. And the remedies on the city for failure to close expressly is limited to the $100 deposit. That's the only remedy that the seller can recover against the city, and it's expressly states that seller's sole and exclusive remedy for the city's default shall be to retain the deposit of $100 plus any accrued interest. So if there's a couple of dollars on the 100 in interest, they get to keep that as well. But that's effectively the damages for a default by the city under the purchase and sale agreement that are expressly negotiated and stated in the purchase and sale agreement. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We're going to start here. Ms. Gentry. Is your microphone on?
No. So when does the assessment of the properties happen? Does that happen annually so that the tax increment they're paying, those pilots are being paid incrementally bigger? Is that how that works?
The assessment of the property, you mean?
Right. So you've got the baseline. So now is it annually they're assessed? So you get the pilots start and they start out small and then they grow as the.
So remember, in Ohio, we pay taxation in arrears. So we pay this year for last year's taxation, next year for this year's taxation. So the development will have to be in place before the collections begin.
Okay.
Now, the value of the property, the county usually is very involved in that process. There are meetings with them. They assist quite a bit in agreeing on in advising on what the number is. But ultimately, if there's no agreement, it's the county assessing that value. But normally, what happens is the county is very involved with you from the very beginning, and those numbers are agreed to, and there's schedules that you deal with.
Okay.
But it's working with the county, not treasurer, auditor on that.
Okay, that's fine. So the 30-day notice, since there's no one on that property today, who would actually get notified?
It'll be the notice on the county auditor's website as to whoever is listed as the owner on that property.
Okay. And then if we do purchase this, do we pay taxes on that? That's a stupid question probably, but.
No, it's a very valid question because I think that's a mistake that often people think is they think because a public entity owns property that it's exempt from taxation. There are a number of requirements to be exempt from real estate taxation. One, it has to be publicly owned, and two, it has to be used as public property. It can be used for private property. In this case, because it would be owned by the city and it would be used as public property, it would be exempt from taxation.
Okay.
But if the city one day wants to put a bar on it, that changes the equation, which is not a hypothetical scenario. That's really Cuyahoga County was paying taxes forever on the bar in Whiskey Island.
Okay, and then as part of that agreement, I know I've brought this up in the past and it's not, so my question is there anything in the purchase and sale agreement that would, if it's determined that we cannot afford to or find grants to clean up or purchase the submerged land lease. Is there any way we can back out of the purchase and sale because we can't come to an agreement with the submerged land lease?
I will defer to Todd to speak on that, but I think the simple answer is the city has, I just went through some of the out provisions. They're very, very broad provisions, and I don't mean that the city would ever intentionally do that, but the worst case scenario, if the city were to breach the agreement, the remedy is, it's the loss of the $100. But again, not that the city would do that. I think we would try very much to do.
No,
what we
I
need to do.
agree, and
But
that,
it's,
but I just
yeah.
want to make sure that we're covered because that's a big question mark in my mind, and we're being asked to sign, to agree to the purchase and sale, and if we don't know that piece, I'm very concerned.
And that's, I don't know if Todd wants to add anything, but that's effectively is their. Yeah, go ahead.
And answer that question. So specifically, submerged land lease is not part of this transaction. As I've discussed before, the intent is to do the evaluation off the shoreline to make sure that before we close on this site and as part of the VAP process that we're investigating sediments in the lake, which may or may not be part of the submerged land lease. So we flagged that, but to be direct about it, that's a next step in the phased process for evaluating this transaction.
Okay.
So it's not included as part of this transaction.
If I think, I've said this before, the term public-private partnership gets thrown around quite a bit, and often inappropriately sometimes. We throw. This case is almost unique in that it truly, if you think of it in every sense, it is a public-private partnership, what we're doing here. A lot of what we're doing is based on faith, right? Is we're going through this entire process to enable the developer to be able to market the property, because if they were to go market the property without the zoning in place, without having the knowing that the city's willing to do the TIF, without what you're trying to sell a brownfield or develop a brownfield without any guarantee. Somebody may know that the city may be willing to do something, but not knowing exactly what the city's willing to do. I think this is enabled. So we're providing that to them. We're getting the park out of it. So there is a lot of good faith built into this in both directions. But when you get to the legal contractual rights, you've seen how broad the exit rights under the purchase and sale agreement. The idea is instead of having penalties that are severe for a breach, build the right incentives in the agreement for everybody to work together. And I think that's the way that this was structured.
Anything else, Ms. Gentry?
No.
Mr. Cos?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. McGlue, thank you again very much for being here. This explanation is, as the other ones have been, really sheds a lot of light on a subject that you mentioned. This is the first one that we've done here in the city of Avon Lake. And when this was first brought up, probably a year ago already, if not even before that, we had never done a TIF here in the city of Avon Lake. And it was a big, scary thing, and it caused some people to have some concerns, and especially with regards to the school was the one instance where people were really having concerns, and some people probably still do. But your information and the way that you've been able to explain this, I think, has eased a lot of concerns as well too. The numbers that were brought up with the 1,800 or so TIFs in the community, I think, is very telling that this is a common tool, and it's used throughout the state for projects. Maybe not on this scale or identical, but very similar. You said a couple of things that I was doing some research before this meeting and the days up to it with regards to some of these other TIFs, and particularly with the school part. And this is the part that I just kind of want to put out there for the public. It was mentioned, I think it was last week by Mr. Davis or 2 weeks ago, that the city of Dublin has 42 TIFs in that city. and maybe all of them didn't need school approval. Maybe some of them did and some of them didn't. But there were definitely probably some that did. And the Dublin School District is one of the A-plus school districts in the state of Ohio. More locally, the Solon School District is one of the A-plus districts in the state of Ohio. Those are the ones that Avon Lake competes with as far as school districts, and that we aspire to be closer to them. We've got a great school system, but those ones are exemplary. We always strive to be like them in that same level. And reading on the Solon School District TIF, it was last year, and there was an article, and I encourage people in the community just to Google Solon TIF from 2024. There was a brownfield that they were redeveloping. The city of Solon wanted to have redeveloped, a private developer. I think it was like 9 acres, 10 acres, whatever it was, of a brownfield, a former Ford plant or something like that. And the Solon School District, in their negotiation with the TIF, came up with a really unique way to do it. And the article explained it. I'm not going to go into the details of it because I'll screw it up. But it was really, really well done, and it was a unique way that they negotiated it, unlike many of the other TIF districts' negotiations with schools. So I hope that our school district would take that same initiative and look to see what Solon did, and that the community realize that if Solon can do it with a great school district, if Dublin can do it and maintain a great school district, Avon Lake can do it as well too. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, David. Mr. Shamir?
I'll wait on, my questions may crisscross others, so.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Arnold?
I don't have anything. I appreciate coming in the last year and a half, and he's explained this to us publicly and to council many times, so I appreciate coming back today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Arnold, I will be coming back to you since this is your committee when we're all finished. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. That last slide that you have, if we could, I'd like to make sure everybody on council gets that. Those were the questions that I specifically asked, that I was concerned about, and I think that they've been well answered. So I'd like everybody to make sure to take a look at it, see what it says. And I appreciate Todd and yourself getting back to me on those. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
the thanks go to Todd on that one. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know, but I appreciate that it was brought up tonight, because I think that's
Very important for everybody to know. Thank you.
Mr. Zuber?
I wanted you to talk a little bit more detail about what kind of reimbursements the schools have gotten through a TIF or through tax abatement, because we've only dealt with tax abatement, and if there's an abatement that the school agrees to, I think 100% of the time, at least in Avon Lake, and I'm sure it's the same in other school districts, there's money that's given in lieu of that the schools can use differently than they can use property taxes, which to some degree the schools like. But if you could talk a little bit about how many TIFs that you've worked with or that you know of where the TIF has been granted by the school, but also you've talked about the compensation package back to the school. Because I think that that's something that people need to understand, is that if this is going to be a $30 million TIF, and that's all subject to change, and I understand that's a negotiation, but that's or a $60 million TIF, that's $2 million a year for 30 years. So talk a little bit about the structure of the money that would go back to the school district that they would use for different ways.
Sure thing, and I think that's the beauty of the process of what works here is the no two projects are the same, and the needs of every community are different. So the process allows you the flexibility to negotiate what best suits the school district's needs and what best suits the development. There is the overriding question in terms of how much does the development need to happen, right? So you know, that's an elemental question that you have to get over, and the school district will make the developer go through multiple budgets. They will verify the budgets themselves. And again, I don't mean to speak for this school district. They obviously they have some very competent leadership and who have actually engagement with TIFs from Brecksville, and they you know, for Valor Acres, and I think they've they have advisors on the outside also helping them. But you know, there are a myriad of things that you could do. So there are some school districts that come in and they may want to negotiate a certain percentage. They may want to say, we want 10% in period, that's what it is. You may have school districts that come in and negotiate for leftover money. Basically what I mean is sometimes the pilots will come higher than the amount necessary for the service, to service the debt. So what happens with that leftover money? Sometimes school districts say that money goes to the school district. In this case, you have again, the school district had a base of taxation when the power plant was open that vanished overnight. They could potentially try to recoup some of that. So I think they would, the sky's the limit. It's truly a negotiation process. It's an open process between as to what suits the school district and what they're willing to live with. I've had school districts negotiate for apprenticeship programs for their students and during the construction process. You know, you have, so it's not just always monetary. They may want some other benefits for their students and things of that nature. So it really is open. There is no sort of hard limits in terms of what the school district will ask for. But I think before they do that, they want to see your budget, they want to see your numbers, they want to know that they're real, and then that they're negotiating from those numbers. And I think that's what has to be proven to them, and that's where it would go.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Mr. Super? Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Shamir, go ahead. Then I have some.
Mr. Makhlouf, I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. And I think it was quite eye-opening on many fronts. I've got a few questions, if I may. You made a mention that the TIF could be utilized for public infrastructure improvements to include environmental remediation, demolition, land purchase. That was on the first slide. Those were the three highlighted ones. But I think it also included infrastructure development. I guess the question that I've got is when the number 60 million came about. I mean, it didn't just show up somewhere. What was the thought process of where this $60 million would potentially be used and how it would be used? Because that's been one of the questions that I've had since day one. How did we come up with a number, divvy it up, $15 million for a purchase, $15 million for regrading, and $30 million for ancillaries, whatever that the infrastructure requirements would be. And I'm wondering how that came about.
Honestly, go ahead, Todd. Yeah.
I thought, I'm sure that I addressed this in my strategy discussion of a couple of weeks ago, but I'm happy to go over it again. The $60 million number came through a couple of different ways in our negotiation. As we negotiated the purchase price for $15 million, I also negotiated for $15 million to have not just a piece of raw land, we wanted money to improve the park. We also thought it was appropriate, so that resulted in $30 million of the TIF. We also, in our discussions about structure and strategy, said that we wanted to make sure that there was enough additional TIF available to help pay for some of the other eligible expenses that are on the slide to support and unlock the value of this piece of property. And so that's how that $60 million figure came up, at least from a strategy perspective. If you recall, I also mentioned that, because it's been questioned, well, we're paying $30 million for the park. Well, no, not so much. We're paying $15 million for the land. We had significant appraisals that supported the valuation of the land. Again, we would like to have a significant enough budget to start with doing some of the improvements that we think are necessary to make it the kind of park that we all envision in this area. And so that's the reason that that $15 million tranche of funding was included. I also mentioned during that discussion that if the city, in its wisdom, decided that it didn't want the extra $15 million worth of improvements, they could cut it out. And that ALERG, who happens to be in the room, and certainly I think we can hear from ALERG as a part of this discussion with council's permission. They certainly wouldn't oppose that, but I think it would be a poor idea and inconsistent with our understanding of what the city wanted in the context of creating one of the best lakefront parks in the state of Ohio. And the image that has been shared, the beautiful image that ALERG has used from Gensler, I know, having done this kind of work historically, the kind of money that you need to do even the basic improvements on the park. And certainly we wanted to have a good start in that process. So hopefully that addresses your question at least. You may or may not be satisfied with the answer, but that's the rationale.
Mr. Shamir, you have another question?
Actually, I do. May I switch over to presentation? I'm just gonna, if that's okay, I'm gonna share my presentation.
I think he has to
Stop the share and then he can share.
It's on your computer.
Stop this year? Okay. Thank you.
Give just a moment. And then you can share. I think it's on the bottom to increase it.
I thought you would be able to increase.
Control plus. Control plus.
I can see that.
Can you see it? Okay, very good, thank you.
So if it's okay, I'm just gonna go through this. I don't have control of it. There we go. Well, maybe. So that, I mean, I have no qualms about 15 million for improvements and the discussion on a beach and the potential of having a beach. Where I'm going to go quickly through these slides is what we call regrading of the parkland. So if we look at, and I'm going to do a quick run. So when I visited the site, that area, the inlet into the old intake area is now fully covered. So the sediments have pretty much covered the area. That is a satellite image off Google from September of this year. And then, if I may, this is effectively what I realized the condition of that area is. It doesn't look like there's a lag. As I walk through that whole length of red. And again, the submerged land lease is part of the city's strategy of what that land will be used for. I mean, we have spoken about a beach, having a beach and beach access for the community. So when you walk through here in an area where, again, it requires investigation, one of the things that you see is a lot of soot. This is soot from November 11th, which is, I mean, understandable. There's been operation, but if you take a stick and dig further into what that sandbar area looks, there's plenty of layering of soot that goes down. So again, the concept of the land lease being understood, the submerged land lease being understood as a part of this development, I think is critical. Because, I mean, unless that is black sand, which is not, we're not in Santorini, we're not in Sicily or Bali, that is coal soot, which is out there still washing back and forth. Now, where the source is, where it's coming from, that's all to be discussed. This is something that I put up last week of what it would cost if we wanted to have a 300-yard beach area, somewhere between $6 and $16 million. Now, we might want to have a smaller beach area, the potential capping requirements. Now, the goal is to have a clear understanding of shoreline stabilization and beach feasibility and the fiscal obligations of our community to do that. You know, we are looking at purchasing this 23.22 acre. Now, we want to make sure that we integrate the findings into the PSA negotiation. That is to make sure that we have fair valuation and risk allocation of that asset as a composition between what's on the ground, on land, and what is in that transitional and into the lake. Now, if you take a look at that satellite image, which is from September of 2025, that shows the site as is today. You will see two round circles. Those circles are each roughly about a little over 2,000 square yards. 2,000 square yards, which is actually rubble. So it's a combination of concrete, rebar, and it's piled to be dealt with in the future. Furthermore, I mean, this is kind of what we're looking at. This is not at this site, but this is pretty much the condition of what you will find on site. That is broken up concrete and rebar at those two locations. Now, again, this is part of the environmental investigation. Things that you may find out there, from asbestos to PCBs to mercury, which will be discussed, I mean, as a part of the environmental investigation that Verdantis will be conducting on behalf of the city. But some of the environmental issues out there with those piles, if they remain, is airborne dust, because that's what you have when you have piles of rubble. You have the potential of water pollution, soil contamination, and hazardous material, because none of that concrete material has been segregated based on what is contaminated and what is not. So if we look onto the other end of it, you will see the next section, which is rubble again. Now the rubble sits into where the land is allocated for redevelopment by a developer. Below that, on this side, you have structures which will have to be knocked down and removed in the regrading process. And this is what I want to ask the question. When we talk about $15 million worth of rework and making it a great park, a substantial amount of that will go towards actual remediation. So we will not only be regrading, but we will be remediating those piles of rubble. We will be removing them because they have to be crushed, they have to be sampled, segregated, and dealt with. Now, whether you're going to spread it onto site and move it around and then cap it, or How you're going to deal with it is my question. So is that $15 million that we're purchasing goes to ALERG? Great. The next $15 million is for site regrading and remediation. The understanding, at least as I would like to know, is what portion, what costs are we looking at? And when I ask the question of who's going to maintain that park, that is the operation and maintenance, I hear the answer, well, Lorraine Metro Parks. So does Lorraine Metro Parks have the financial requirements to maintain and upkeep the cap on the park from now to eternity, as well as whatever else that may fall into it? That includes the beach or not, I don't know. So these are specific questions that I would like answered, because, I mean, if Lorraine Metro Parks is going to cover operation and maintenance, fantastic. That's great news. So they're committing to the O&M of whatever remedial action, at least as far as what we've discussed, is going to have in the long run. And then the question is, how much is it going to cost to remove all that rubble from that area? Because when I asked the question, who is going to deal with this rubble, said this is part of the TIF specifically. Well, being part of the TIF, that's remediation of a significant amount of rubble. The other component of it is, how long is that rubble going to sit there? These are specific questions, because if it sits there for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whenever that it sits, it will leach. It may leach nothing, and it may leach everything. The concept of the TIF, I have no problem with, but the clarity on what allocation and what funds are required to do what, that is the uncertainty and lack of clarity. At least maybe I'm not as bright as everyone else, so I may not understand. So I would like a dummy version for me of what exactly and how exactly this thing will evolve. And that's effectively my question, and I would love to hear some answers with respect to that. Thank you.
Majid, is this for you or is this for Todd Davis?
On the environmental remediation, all that stuff, it's really more
Sorry
for Todd.
Yeah.
And Steve Gross, but Todd, I don't know if you're ready to answer.
No, I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be sitting down. I've been
No,
dealing
no,
with
I
sciatica.
understand.
I'm just,
I understand.
every opportunity I have to sit down, I take it.
So thank you for those questions. I think if you'll go back and look at the presentation that I did on strategy, I specifically answered a number of the questions that were just raised. And I did it at length during that presentation. But I can answer them again with respect to the specific questions that you just asked. Number one, with respect to the piles themselves, we went back to the slide with the different buckets of, and Councilman Shamir, if you wouldn't mind going back to the previous slide with your buckets. There you go. Thank you.
No.
Nope.
Nope.
You just missed it. Yeah. Okay. There, thank you.
That's it.
There's a lag. I do apologize.
I understand. So during my presentation, I clarified that the $15 million for acquisition is straightforward. The $15 million for site grading, your term is remediation. On my slide, I clarified very specifically, and it was with respect to Council President Fenderbosch's question, because she went through a litany of different, what could we do on the park kind of questions and issues. And I said that $15 million bucket was intended to provide solely site improvements, not remediation. We've talked historically, and I do agree with you, however, that there is some overlap with respect to using best practices to integrate the remedy with the site improvements. So some of the grading to create the park arguably is going to result in a final solution for the site, it doesn't make any sense to do a site grading and separate it from the remedial process. You want to try to integrate that to save costs. But it's very clear, and I've been clear with ALERG, that any of the remediation or the demolition that's going to occur, demolition costs that are going to occur are going to come from that $30 million bucket below on the bottom. So again, feel free to go back to the presentation that I made, go back to the slides, but I believe I was as clear as I could be with respect to those issues. Secondly, with respect to your specific question about the piles and the crushing that needs to be done and the rebar removal, that's something that, as it occurs, if TIF funds are available to address that, it's going to have to come out of that $30 million bucket, or it's going to have to come out of grant funds. We're hoping to apply for a significant round of grant funding in the spring. There's up to $10 million of grant funding that may be available to help mitigate some of those additional costs. And certainly that money can go to address a number of the additional concerns that you raised. We don't have that funding in place, but I think we have a compelling project that hopefully the community will support, and that will give, hopefully another significant amount of funding that's not part of the TIF to address those issues. Third, with respect to the statement that you just made about leaching and those piles sitting there, well, remember that there's no closing on this piece of property until Steve Gross is prepared to issue a no further action letter in connection with the property. So, and we've specifically raised this question and this issue about the piles in Exhibit E in the condition of the property to the real estate purchase agreement. So we'll assess whether there's any risk associated with materials that are in those piles before Steve can issue a no further action letter in connection with the property. So I think that we've, certainly Steve Gross, through our own due diligence, will do the assessment. As you know, whenever there's a significant demo project, there's going to be crushed concrete of this nature. I do it on every single project, specifically projects like this. Sometimes you find concerns. Usually you don't. If you find concerns, I know Steve already has in his sampling plan, there needs to be a demonstration that we have ultimately clean hard fill that's crushed before it can be reused on the property. And if it doesn't meet that standard, it can't be reused on the property. So, we're very cognizant of how we need to manage all of the environmental issues associated with this piece of property. I guess finally, with respect to your question about, what you showed in terms of the off-site issues, be they in the submerged land lease or below the ordinary high water mark, understand that ALERG may not even be responsible for that property that you just showed on the slide. And candidly, without understanding exactly where it is, whether that's inside or outside the submerged land lease, I'm sure that you would acknowledge that without data and sampling of the sediments, which we've already said that we plan to do as part of this process, and we agree, we're in total agreement that it's important, that we don't, showing a picture of what you characterized as soot in Lake Erie, you can go up and down Lake Erie and find similar issues, and without data, you can't characterize what that is. So, I'm sure you're not trying to say that the slide that you showed is above applicable standards, but I've, a couple of responses. Number one, we've committed that we need to do an evaluation, and that's part of the process. Number two, we need to work with Ohio EPA. You know, ultimately, that land is owned by the state of Ohio. State of Ohio is going to be as concerned as the residents of Avon Lake about impacts to the lake, impacts to the sediment, impacts in the submerged land lease. And, you know, there are many different next steps that we'll take in order to address those issues. So your points are well taken. They're duly noted. I think they're valid, certainly valid points. But, you know, as we try to structure a deal that makes sense, we've got to start in a phased and smart approach. This is the first major phase to unlock the value of this project for the community. We'll deal with the other issues appropriately as next phases of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Shamir. Anything else? Okay.
Just one thing. I'm just going
Go
to
ahead.
close it up. Mr. Davis, I don't disagree. It wasn't the soot was a visual inspection, as I had seen in satellite imagery over the years. It was still the same, but Mr. Koss, during our visit, made a comment which I think is a good way forward, is for Steve and myself to walk the site together and get a clear understanding of what the plan is and close the subject.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask one more time. Anybody to my right? Anybody to my left? Yes, sir, Mr. Zuber?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the same comment that Mr. Davis did. I think, Mr. Shamir, sometimes you make some statements. When you said that was coal soot, you have no idea what that is, and you made an assumption. And I think that sometimes when you do that, you put things out there that are incorrect. And I would hope that in the future, when you make some of these statements prior to making them, that you can stop and think about how that may affect the perception of what we're doing here. Because I think for you to say that was coal soot when you have no idea, that is just wrong, and it presents a perception in the public that is incorrect. And I just hope that in the future you would reevaluate sometimes when you make some of those blanket statements.
May I?
Thank you, sir. Yes, and then I'm going to be making a
Very
comment.
Mr. Zuber, let me be clear. I said it might be coal soot. When I was there, I grabbed and I rubbed, and I started my career in the coal fields. I have been around coal and coal soot long enough to know what coal soot is. So there is no damn assumption, excuse my language, but there is no hesitation to speak my mind. And what I said, I will go back out there and I will collect the sample with yourself and I'll pay for it. Let's go assess it. I'll be more than glad to do so. I have dealt with plenty of coal soot, and this, I have no hesitation. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I would like to make some comments because as council president, I facilitate the meeting, right, Majid? And I always come around to the very last. And I just want to go back to where we started. So tonight's meeting was about, the work session was about the TIF and to help the public understand the TIF. And I, along with a lot of other council people, have received comments from the public having concerns and fears. And I think that what you did was very simply take this complex process and just start breaking it down and showing where the risk could be, where the risk is not, and what you and others have done to mitigate that risk to the city. And with that said, I have a question. Okay, so we talked about the fact that once this is in the process of being developed, and hopefully we have our real estate agents back here and you're bringing in developers and they're developing it, And then there would be new evaluations, the schedule of which the county would have an agreement of when they would be evaluating them. Okay, we talked about that. What I need to have more clarification in my mind about, I understand this is a trustee, but the guarantee. Can you talk about that minimum service? You said that possibly that would be negotiated with developers?
So, yeah, let me clarify what that is. It really has much to do with the interest rate that you get on the bonds, right? The more secure the bonds are, the better interest rate that you'd be able to get on the bonds. So that's why when you have that's why you do credit rating of the, if you have, depending on your credit rating, that's going to control they credit rate the issuance itself, right? The actual bond issuance. So they'll look to the revenue that you're using, the certainty of the revenue that you're using to pledge to service the debt. And depending on the type of the development, sometimes it may necessitate what's called a minimum service payment, the guaranteed minimum service payment, which would make sure that if the pilots or whatever, this could be in this case, we're using pilots to service the debt. You could do the same thing if you have an apartment complex and you're, using the rent payroll, the rent rolls to service the debt. The lender in that case wants to make sure that no matter if it falls short, that you're not going to short them on their payment, that somebody has to come in and plug that hole. And the city has contractually made it very clear that it will not be in any position where it would be asked to plug that hole. It will not be pledging its full faith and credit for it. It will not be guaranteeing it in any way. So if in the issuance of the debt, that's going to determine on a whole slew of factors in terms of what it requires. A minimum service payment ends up being required. Somebody has to provide it, and often it's the developer that provides the minimum service payment in these kinds of...
Is that through an insurance policy?
It's not an insurance policy. It's, I'm not sure what you mean by...
I didn't know if an insurance policy would be taken out by the developer.
It's not, no, it would not, I'm not aware at least of any insurance that would cover that.
But I really appreciate you going through the detail because one of the largest fears that many of us are hearing from residents has to do with the fear of the future risk. Not only maintenance, but just the future risk of the project. If we don't have enough developers coming in as fast as what we think we're going to have come in, right? And I think also when, Mr. Davis, when you're talking about steps, and you said this before, this has been cut into different stages so that there can be a designer of the park, a park designer. And once the park designer is in place, then you start talking about how you're going to use some of those piles that Mr. Shamir is talking about. So it would behoove us to move, in my mind, as quickly through this as possible so that we could get those piles utilized into where there might be mounds that you're going to be putting a cap over so that the area isn't completely flat. It has some interest, right? So all of that works together in stages. So we are going to get to the beach. We are going to be getting to the submerged land lease, correct? It's just steps and stages. Okay. We have, yes.
That's the plan. The other thing I would add to that is we emphasized this before. This is a long due diligence process, and it starts with the signing of the purchase and sale agreement. Understanding and the reason we were engaged in this process is to work collectively to roll up our sleeves to use the energy and the expertise that not only certain members of city council have, but your outside professionals and as you mentioned, a park designer who's not yet even been selected to come up with how we reinvigorate the power plant and make it one of the best economic development opportunities in Avon Lake's history. That's one of the primary goals. And to do it in a way that doesn't cost the city an arm and a leg. So You know, one of the statements that was made earlier in the public comment section that seems to be coming up over and over again is, you know, my attempt to simplify and clarify the no TIF, no deal. That's not a threat. That's just a fact. The way this deal was structured, if there's no TIF that's put in place, there's no funds to pay for all of these costs without the city digging into its own pocket and figuring out another way to do this. And so this is an elegant structure that addresses all of the goals that the city tasked this team with trying to solve. Is it good?
Individuals who are representing ALERG, Shara, and we actually are here, the Metro Parks. I'm wondering if any of them would like to come forward and speak at this time.
Any of them, if they want to come forward. I just wanted to make a quick comment, if I may, Council President, because I obviously on the environmental issues, on that's or even the vision, that's why somebody like Todd is here. That's why Steve Gross is here. I would defer to them. I would trust them with my child. That's how well versed they are in this. But the one point I wanted to emphasize is the big picture, the structure that we're dealing with. I think the council, thanks to Councilman Shamir, I think just got to witness. Again, I don't mean the interaction with that. Why this deal was structured the way it was and the benefits to the city to structure the deal this way. None of these questions would have been raised, addressed, answered if the deal wasn't structured this way. Had the city simply gone about, we're rezoning the property and you have to provide a park, what power does the city have over environmental remediation? What control does the city have over any of these structures? The city would have been completely out of it. We would have simply had planning commission review, for development plans. Anytime you raise up an environmental issue, it's being dealt with by the Ohio EPA, it's being dealt with some other place, it's outside of your jurisdiction. It is this structure that is enabling the city to ask those questions and to be very much involved in those questions. And I think there's nothing I could have said that have probably visually showed it to the council better than the interaction that we just had, that I think shows you, I hope, the wisdom of the structure that we selected. And with that, I defer to if anybody wants to say something.
Right, because we're trying to be as transparent as possible. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself again for those that are watching from home?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Reshley. I'm here representing ALERG, and appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight. I think Majid and Todd have done a good job explaining the TIF process. I just wanted to say a couple comments about the journey we've been on together. We first engaged with the city 5 years ago, last September, and we've been in the city of Avon Lake now for 4 years. 4 years this month. I think we have been here for our goal has been to deliver a quality product to the city for the residents, and because that's what they asked for when we had our public meeting back in July of 2022. That was the overwhelming comment, was to be able to have access to the beach. And we've continued to want to deliver on that promise. And I think we've done a good job so far delivering on that goal and expectation. As we've all heard today, this is still the continuation of a process. I will say that we have stood behind everything we've done. I will say also that I'm very proud of what ALERG has done over the last 4 years. We've been a good steward in the community, I think. I think we've, been a contributor to numerous charities and other organizations because we want to be present in the city that we are living in and working in. We've also donated countless other items to the library, to Historical Society, other organizations, all because we want to be able to contribute because it's the right thing to do. I'll also say where there's been some of these comments of only ALERG is the one that's going to be getting value out of all of this. I would say ALREG is the only one that has spent any money on this so far. We have spent $50 to $60 million on this project so far, investing to be able to do the remediation, acquire the site, do the demolition. And that's a significant investment that we've made in the community, and we will continue to stand by what we said we would do. And, ultimately though, we now are at this process where we are going to have the decision in front of the council to either sign the PSA or not. We are committed to continuing to do what we said we would do in that PSA, and we want to look forward to continuing to move forward. So thank you for your opportunity to talk tonight. And if there are other questions, TIF related or other things that I can answer, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Shamir?
Just wondering if we can arrange for Steve Gross and myself with someone to come through the site. Is that a possibility? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that's here? We have people from Chicago, we have people from Cleveland. Lorraine? Okay, thank you. All right. At this point in time, Mr. Arnold, it's back to you. I believe that we, Mr. Davis, I'm sorry. Anything else from you, sir? Okay, anything else from you, Majid?
No,
Sir?
thank you very much.
Mr. Arnold, it's back to you.
No, just thanks again, Majid and Todd, for coming in once again and going through the TIF process and talking about some of the other concerns that some of us have and questions and things of that sort. So we look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, there's going to be a little bit of information. As you have noticed, Mr. Mayor is not here. He's under the weather. And there is a building movement alarm that goes off at 11. And if you guys don't mind, if it goes off, we will ignore it. Hopefully, he can see it if he's watching. Maybe the law director or Mr. Liskovic could text him close to 11 so we can let the police department and the security people know that we're still ongoing because we have a whole CCM in front of us. Mr. Liskovic, you could do that, sir? Sure. Very good, thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move ahead. Do we need to take a break? Anybody take a break? We can move forward? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to have a very short break. We will be right back. This is a point of order type break, and we will return. Okay, we're going to start the CCM now. This is November the 17th, and at this point in time, residents can speak on any topic that they want for 5 minutes. Come on up. This is per section 220.21B1. Thank you.
Good evening, Robert Baker, Avon Lake. In tonight's CCM agenda, note income tax will be discussed. From attending the budget work sessions and finance committee meetings, I understand that Mayor Spetzel and his administration have requested the council consider asking the voters to approve an income tax increase. Having heard much of your recent discussion on the issue, I would like to express my appreciation to Mr. Zuber for clearly requesting that the administration provide its recommendation on the various options presented to council by the mayor and his administration, and to Mr. Cos for insisting that any requested funds be specifically earmarked for road replacement and repair only, and for advocating that the legislative decision-making process extend into 2026 so the newly elected council members may be included in the final vote. As council continues to deliberate and move forward to final decisions on this matter, it's my hope that we'll hear discussions that include further understanding beyond inflation and tariffs of what has occurred since Mayor Zilko's departure to bring the city to this current point of need, learning what alternative revenue sources were pursued and secured to address the identified needs before this request came forth, sharing the cost-cutting actions taken by the administration to help mitigate the need for this request, and identifying the specific cost-cutting measures the administration may plan to implement or plans to implement should the voters not approve an income tax increase. Thank you for your time. And if you need those,
Thank you.
I'm on the record. I'm good.
Would you like?
I'll
to?
take
You need a
If you don't
copy of it to
We'll
see
always-
what my
We'll
remarks
always
were?
take things
All
in
right.
writing. Anybody else? Let's stop this time. Just a sec, we're gonna redo the clock. Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Gerald Phillips, Avon Lake resident, 20 years. Concerned citizen. I hear a lot about the agreement with the PSA and ALERG that we're accomplishing all the goals that we were set out to be. Well, one of the goals was access to the beach. The PSA doesn't have any rights to get the submerged land lease. And when ALERG bought the property, one of the conditions of the purchase agreement was they got an assignment of the submerged land lease. And I find it very ironic that we're gonna be buying land and we don't have a right to the assignment of the submerged land lease in the PSA. Me, as an attorney, would have put it in there. I think it's just prudent practice, because you don't have a right for this submerged land lease. Now, has anybody seen this submerged land lease? Do you know what's in it? Do you know what limitations are? There's nothing in that submerged land lease that lets you put a beach. The use is restricted to being a utility. Intake, outtake, and erosion control. That's the use and purposes in the submerged land lease. Now, if you're gonna make access to the beach, you're gonna have to have higher EPA standards for that than just pure recreational on top. And as Mr. Shamir indicated, you know, we don't know what that number is. Could be anywhere from 19 million to 16 million. So I find it very ironic that you're gonna enter into a PSA agreement and access to the beach is so critical, so important. Why it isn't in the PSA? You know, here's the submerged land lease. I'm sure none of you read it. Now, I heard somebody from ALERG indicated that they put $50–60 million in it. Well, on LoopNet, they were going to sell all the property for 28. That doesn't make sense. Are they in the business to lose money? That's what's on the LoopNet, 28. Bulk purchase, all the land. You know, I find it very ironic and misleading, that number. If they're going to sell it for 28, they're going to make a profit. They didn't buy it to make to lose money. So, you know, this thing, the PSA should be tabled until you modify the agreement, and you get as part of the agreement, you have the ability to get the assignment of the lease subject to the environmental and due diligence, just like you got on the top of the land. You can do it just for the submerged land lease too, because you're going to need the consent. They did. They didn't buy the land without a submerged land lease. Why don't you? So we can talk about, in 20 years, I've been in Avon Lake, and for 20 years the city's been run fiscally responsible. Now we got to get an income tax increase. Why? You know why? Mismanagement. You pay a lot of salaries. You have a lot of duplications. We don't even have an engineer. We don't have an engineer. We had 3 engineers, candidate 1, 2, and 3, that were excellent. We didn't hire them, okay? We waste a lot of money. We pay people very high salaries. I'm sure the public service department salaries are a lot higher than they were when Joe Wrights was here. So when you go to the ballot box, you're gonna have a ballot box, you're gonna have a hard time selling that income tax you know? I just can't imagine why have a deficit and we can't fund our operations.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come forward at this time?
William Zimmerman. So I'd like to talk about a variety of subjects. How about the flock system that we're using? I've come across some other information. I've tried to share it with a couple council people about the fact that there are more and more people who can break into the system and access all the information on their own. People on the internet that show you how to do it. And here we are. We thought this was making us safer. I don't believe it is. Putting more of us at risk. They even have the ability now to track through GPS where the police officers are. That's a scary thought. People can commit crimes wherever they want if they know where the police are. It's a horrible system. We should get rid of it. So let's talk about the 0.5% increase that City Council now wants to pass. Income tax. As Mr. Phillips stated, it's been fiscally responsible here. For the last few years, it has not been. So my question to the citizens of the city are you better off than you were 2 years ago? Now a tax increase is on the horizon. We still don't know what's going on with the whole ALERG project. I think it's interesting that nobody ever brings up that the TIF is only a mandate if it doesn't fit the but-for requirement. I think we're losing perspectives. Just like the school purchase. The city now wants to buy Erie View. $100,000 a year for the next 5 years, starting in 27. The problem is that property is worth $2.4 million. So why is the city getting a deal? Is this to set up a quid pro quo with the TIF? I don't understand why it would be such a significant amount less than the value of the property. Surely not because we love y'all. $2.4 million. Somebody could buy that, tear it down. Now it's my understanding it hasn't gone out to bid. Could. I know people who would buy that in a heartbeat. Same people who I've chatted with about the power plant project, and yet I got all the way to the NDA, and then Avis and Young shut it down. They shut it down. Told me they didn't even talk to me anymore. They didn't tell me anything. Let's just be clear about it. Shut it down. So I didn't have discussions, couldn't get on the property, couldn't talk to anybody, nothing. They shut it down. I signed the documents, sent them back. Never got a reply. Those are the people we have representing us. Same people who had stuff out on LoopNet that after I made a call to someone, 20 minutes later it was taken down. Off the site. Imagine that. Disappearing. Gone, like the wind. So, one last thing. I've made public records requests, as we know, Todd Davis's billings, over and over and over. People at home, you can't see them. But I know you'll see the next part, because now when I ask for 25, they're totally redacted. What are they hiding? They didn't hide it before. Why are they hiding it now? Don't understand that. Don't know that I'll ever understand that. We're still in the Ohio Supreme Court with the city of Avon Lake, looking for a ruling any day now. Hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Anybody else like to come forward at this time? Is there anything, Mr. Law Director, you'd like to respond to at this time?
No, I'm not.
Okay, we're going to go on then. Communications, Environmental, and Recreational Programming Committee. Mr. Shamir, you are on next. Sir.
Yes, we are having amendments to CERP committees, amendment to Chapter 278 for the Communication and Technology Commission. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Now, previously, there was 3 ex officios that were indicated on that chapter, and it's now changed to 2 ex officios. And addition has been made that whoever that is appointed has to have lived in the city of Avon Lake for 2 years, and that the terms are 3 years staggered. So this is to ensure that we have a handover, proper handover amongst board members. Is there any questions?
I have a comment, Mr. Shamir, and my comments are going to be not only for yours, but for all of them, so I'll just get it out there right now. As we're working on this, because this is going to be a 3 reading, so we have a chance to amend them, I think we need to describe what an ex officio is, because an ex officio can vote unless it specifically says non-voting. And all elected officials, we're asking them to be non-voting members, so that would help with the quorum.
Exactly.
And then I think we also have to define the quorum. So, for example, in this particular case, 3 members are quorum. Maybe in another one, it'll be 7 members. But I think we have to actually define that. And last but not least, in all of these, I think there needs to be a paragraph about terminating members for non-participation underneath the membership. And those suggestions are coming from the ad hoc committee.
Yes.
Any further comments? So I don't have to repeat myself over and over again? Okay, thank you. Anything else, sir?
The next one is the EAB. I just want to make a comment. As the EAB, excuse me, just 1 second.
Chapter 284.
I've got. Okay, as the EAB is an advisory board to the council, I would like to note that the city administration has a representative already there, and that is the Public Works Director. So I would recommend, in order to keep that group solely focused on advising council, to keep the appointments all council appointments.
Any comments from council? To the left? To the right? Okay. Thank you, sir. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Then you have another one, Chapter
Park
286.
286, Chapter 286 for the parks. And there is really no comments there on that chapter as it sits.
Okay. And just like the other ones, quorum needs to be in
Yes.
there, terminating members needs to be in there. Okay, very good. Anybody else? To my right, to my left? Thank you, sir. Anything else that you want to add, sir?
Nope,
From your
that's it.
committee?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zuber, Finance Committee.
Yeah, the first item we have is the income tax. There's been discussion. We had a special meeting last Wednesday devoted specifically to income tax or the repeal of the tax credit or the reciprocity that we have. We had a wide-ranging discussion. There were several different options that were put forward by the administration, none of which we had a consensus on. We weren't looking to get a consensus. We just got a lot of feedback from different members of council, and it was then at the budget meeting on Saturday morning, we had some further discussion about the income tax or the reciprocity or doing away with a partial or all of the credit. And it was basically a consensus of the group at that point in time that it would be of the opinion that the new council, being that it would take effect under their term, that they should be the one that would be putting this forward. It was thought prior in some of the discussions that I had, both with the council clerk and the finance director, that if we were talking about doing this, we would have to do 3 readings this year, which would then start next Monday. But I think it's the opinion of council at this point in time to let the council that comes in on January 1st deal with this, and they can decide on exactly what they want to do. Many different council had different ideas, so basically that item is going to be moved till the beginning of next year.
Okay, there might be further discussion this year on it, though. Any comments to my right? Comments to my left? Thank you, sir. The next item?
The next item, we also...
I'm sorry, excuse me. I see the finance director. Did you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify, the statement was made prior that it was 0.5%, but that has not been...
Determined.
No, that's not been determined. It would go into discussion next year.
And also it was stated that, Mr. Cos stated that all of the funds would be dedicated to the street, and that is not the case either. There would be funds dedicated to the street, but there could be paying off a debt, there could be some other things. They're still in the mix. Okay, thank you. Mr. Zuber?
Yeah. The other item that we took care of last week at the special finance committee meeting was the salary for the acting chief. The assistant fire chief has been the acting chief since August the 15th. Was passed out of the committee to increase his salary between the assistant chief and the fire chief's salary, since the fire chief's on paid leave at this time. That difference is 15%, so it was a recommendation of the administration that he be granted a 7.5% increase effective on August the 15th for all the duties that he's been performing, both as the assistant chief and the acting chief. So it was also agreed at that time it would be passed by suspension of the rule next week, because it is going back to August 15th.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, sir. Something else?
The 2026 budget, we'll look for first reading next week. We've had several budget meetings. I think that there is pretty much clarity on exactly what we want to do, especially on the capital outcome after Saturday morning's meeting. So we look forward to having the first reading, going through the 3-reading process for the budget.
And I want to thank the finance director and the assistant finance director, and the rest of the administration of helping to put that together. There was a lot of work on it. Anything else, sir, out of your committee?
Yes, I do have one other thing I wanted to go into. We have always had some discussion for, I think it's been the last 3 or 4 months, about the increase in the license fee for cars and trucks for the city of Avon Lake. Contrary to what may be out there on some social media sites, there is no recommendation coming from this council to increase license plate fees. And I just wanted to make note of that, because there are some people out there still saying that we're putting forward that we're going to increase the license plate fee, which we are not. So I wanted to make that very clear this evening.
Thank you for the clarity. Anything else from your committee, sir?
No.
Okay, we're going to go on to Human Resources. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. At our meeting, we discussed a job description for a part-time assistant clerk of council. That's in your packet. So we're going to be looking at that. The main purpose is to help with the duties of the office, and also to cover Civil Service Commission meetings as needed. One thing I would say is, while we'll pass that job description, that job did not get funded through the budget, so it'll be a while till it's implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we're going to move on now to public service. And I chair public service. The very first one is a repeal of the Green Team registration fee. That's codified ordinance section 208.0 5.01 F16. And if you look in your packet, you'll see it's in yellow. Green team registration, $25. It's not in effect. It hasn't been utilized. And so therefore, it was recommended from the Public Works Department that we repeal it. Any questions or comments? Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Repeal green team. Yes? Oh, my intention on this is that we need to get the 208 passed. So, Mrs. Rossmarin, you need to pass it. Suspension of the rule on the second reading? That'll work.
Okay.
Mr. Liskovic? Okay, I mean, that'll work?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. The second one, repeal green team certification, codified ordinance section 1065.11. And that's also in your packet. And that is the description of what the green team is. And that will go along with the same timetable. It'll be special the rule on the second reading. Thank you. Any comments? Okay, we're going to go on to number 3, amendments to Chapter 272, Avon Lake Historical Preservation Commission. That is in your packet. This came out of Mr. Cause's Historic Preservation Commission, and we're making it follow the same template as the other boards and commissions. It'll talk about one ex officio non-voting member, and that would be the Avon Lake Planning Commission to serve as a liaison. One ex officio non-voting member appointed by council, and it goes on. And again, I'm going to recommend that we describe what a quorum is, what an ex officio member is, and that there needs to be a paragraph about terminating members for non-participation. Any further comments on this one? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next topic. That's amendments to codified ordinance chapter 288, the Tree Commission. We'll turn to that one. And there's some comments that have come in from the Tree Commission. Again, we need to define what a quorum is. We need to define what a what an ex officio member is. And the suggestion is to clarify, to say 2 of the members, there's 5 members, 2 of the members shall be appointed each odd year, 1 appointed each even year, and that would keep it going the way that it's going. They thought it was a little confusing the way it's written now, and it's been suggested we do that throughout the other boards and commissions. Any further discussion? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Planning Commission, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam President. On the agenda next week will be the second reading of the improvement plan for Harbor Crest Townhouse subdivision number 1 and number 2. That's the subdivision that wraps around behind the southeast corner of Route 83. We had the first reading. I did indicate to council that I was going to be asking for a suspension of the rules on this matter, as it was asked for during the Planning Commission process, as well as the fact that generally we do this by motion, but there were a couple items that were out for department heads to confirm that they received. I know they did get the park plan today. Mr. Flipkowski let me know that, and so I will be asking for a suspension of the rule on that, as I believe all the matters that were held as to be done by Planning Commission will have been done by that time.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Anybody else? Any comments? Thank you, sir. And you took care of both of those at the same time. Thank you, I appreciate it. The other business that we have in front of us, there's amendments to section 220.05, standing committees. And this is dependent upon, of course, in the description of what just occurred with the boards and the commissions. And all of you have received an email that aligned the boards and the commissions with your committees, with the department heads, and this is bringing it up to date. Any further discussion? The intention is to have this be a 3 reading. Okay? All right, we're going to go on now to legislation. 3rd reading, ordinance number 25-161. Mr. Arnold, any comments?
Actually, I do have one comment on it. There were 2 minor changes. One was in the definitions under section 1484.98, section or it's under C department. So there'll be one change there. Right now in our packet it says building department, but that would be actually under community development department. And then the other change, this has gone 2 readings, and the third one will be next week. The other one is in section 1484.10 under hearing and appeals. We scratched out the Board of Building and Zoning Appeals because we don't have a Building and Zoning Appeals, and we changed that to Lorraine County Court of Common Pleas. That's it on that. So
I
it'll be out
believe-
for 3rd reading next week.
Thank you. I believe Mrs. Rossmarin has received those from the law director, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we have those. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, we're going to go on to ordinance number 25-167. Again, Mr. Arnold, this is yours.
I don't have any further comments on this. We discussed this at length tonight.
Okay,
Thanks.
it's about the PSA. Any further discussions for anyone? Okay, we're going to go on now to ordinance number 25-169. Mr. Arnold, again, this is yours.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that this is a different type of TIF that we're putting on the Sand Ridge and Harbor Crest tax finance incentive districts. This TIF is a lot different than the TIF we talked about tonight. The schools would not be out of any money with this TIF. This is not, a few people have asked me if this would be some type of tax abatement. That's not the case. What this is deferring the county taxes that they would receive come to the city instead of going to the county. Thank you.
And JVS and the school are both carved out. Thank you.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Okay, we're going to go on to ordinance number 25-174. I'm the sponsor of it. Here's the book. We're going to bring it again next week. These are all the ordinances. Somebody had to type them up. You're looking at Mrs. Rossmarin, and she and the law director and Ramona Boggins and others have reviewed them, and now they're in front of us to codify them. Any questions, any comments? Okay, we're going to go on to second readings. Ordinance number 25-175R, Mr. Zuber. Any comments?
This is for the fee schedule increase pool fees by 12% next year and in 2027. And also the start of $75 an hour for the body cam for our police department with a max of $750.
Okay, and I have a question for Mrs. Rossmarin. Mrs. Rossmarin, this is in the second reading. In 2 weeks ago, then for the third reading, we want all the changes to end up being the same.
Yes.
So what I had said earlier about the green team and all that, it needs to all end up the same time. I
Okay.
think it will.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Zuber, on this one?
Nope.
Okay, the next one is the suspension of the rule, ordinance number 25-177. Mr. Zuber?
Yeah, this is the purchasing procedures for the city. We've talked about this for over I think almost 2 years now. That's why when it came out of the committee, we voted to suspend the rule on the second reading. The biggest change here is that we're going between the purchase of $50,000 to the state max, it's $77,000 some dollars. Now we will not be going out for bid for purchases, but we will have council action either at a committee meeting, a collective committee meeting, or at a regular committee of council to approve that expenditure.
Thank you, sir. Any comments, my colleagues? All right, we're going to go on now to ordinance number 25-178, and it has to do with the lodging excise tax on hotels and short-term rentals. And this is something that other communities have done. We're requesting that it be 3%. It would be collected by the platforms that would take the RSVPs. 50% of the funds would be used for marketing and for tourism and for recreation, and the other 50% then would go into the general fund. Any comments on this? Okay, we're going to go on then to ordinance number 25-182. This will be a suspension of the rule. Again, this is something I am sponsoring, and this is authorizing the city to apply for the State of Ohio Brownfield Remediation Fund Assessment Grant, and we're doing it in 2 readings because it's due to the state of Ohio the first week of December. Any comments? Mr. Cos?
Yeah, thank you. My only question is, do we have any idea of when these grants will be awarded? This grant would be, a decision would be made on it once we apply?
When will the grant be awarded? I do not have
When will
that
we know if we
date.
got it or not?
I do not have that. I know,
Okay,
but I
if you
don't
could just, by
have
next
that
week,
date.
that would be great, if you can. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let me write down a note. When award. We will find out and we will get back to everybody. Very good. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Okay, ordinance number 25-184. I'm also sponsoring this one. This is for the acquisition of the former Erie View School property. And this is going to go 3 readings. Any comments? Yes, Mr. Zuber?
Just, I'd make the comment, this is basically the same structure that we had in place when we were talking about purchasing redwood from the school. It's almost the exact mirror image. So there, we've already talked about purchasing a school based on the outcome of the levies.
Absolutely. And this is actually not coming from our general fund. This is coming from a recreational fund that during the 3rd session within the Planning Commission, it's the final stage. The developer would then have to put into funds monies for recreation. So these funds are dedicated, and they can only be used for acquisition of park land, recreational land. Okay. Ordinance number 25-187. Mr. Smith, any further discussion?
Thank you. This, along with 188, I discussed in my planning commission report. I'd only ask that be noted that it's going to be a suspension of the reading on the agenda.
Okay, we're
Thank you.
going to move that to suspension of the rule. You got it. Okay, then ordinance number 25-188. Mr. Smith again, suspension of the rule? Okay.
Same as last.
We are down to miscellaneous business and announcements. Mr. Cos?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I've got 2 quick things, and I'm sorry to
Go for it.
prolong the meeting. The first item that I have is the Toys for Tots campaign is underway here in the city of Avon Lake. The city has Avon Lake City Hall, Avon Lake Fire Department, and the Avon Lake Public Library as the public property locations where people can drop off their new, unopened, and unused toys. Now through December the 12th. If there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, we'll be doing that through the 12th. Everything donated stays here in the county, or in Lorraine County. The second thing that I want to mention is a little bit more serious, and I've given it quite a bit of thought, and I'm going to make a statement right now to address this. At last week's meeting, one of the residents in the audience made a comment that he was given information on me. And talking with other members in the community, it didn't take very long to see what that information on me was. So I'm going to put it all out there right now. And I'm going to do a spoiler alert, and we're going to address this. In late 2003, early 2004, don't quite remember when I was still in my 20s, and I'm going to be 52 very soon, I made a terrible mistake. And I got behind the wheel when I had too much to drink. And I was stopped, and I was cited. And I paid the price for that. And that was something that happened well over 2 decades ago, 23 years ago. I apologize to my family. I apologize to my friends and all of those that I was with. Since that time, I had to look into my heart and decide what did I want to do with my life. Because that was a major mistake that I was determined to come back from. Right after that, I got involved with the Marine Corps League and with Veterans Affairs. My son, who was an infant at the time, he's now in his 2nd year of college, law school, I mean. That's the distance on some of this. Became the focal point of my life with my family. I did junior achievement teaching in Avon Lake City Schools, volunteering for over a dozen years. I coached his football teams, his basketball teams, threw myself into the community wholehearted. And about 4 years after this incident, 4 or 5 years after this incident, I decided I wanted to run for city council. And I ran for city council with this all out there. Anybody could have pulled up a docket sheet, and probably some people did. I was elected, re-elected 5 times since that incident back nearly 23 years ago. So I'd like to think that the public with this information, that the general public with this information being available, has that opportunity at their fingertips, that they can find the mistakes that our elected officials and our leaders have made. And I owned up to mine, and I made changes. And I threw myself, like I said, into the community, and I've never really looked back. And if this information is floating around out there and trying to be circulated as some way to get costs, too late. Doesn't bother me. It's a long time ago. So I wanted to put that out there, and want to say that this is a great community, and if anybody has any questions or comments on this, I'm more than happy to speak with them. Thank you.
Very proud of you, Mr. Cos. Everyone in their life grows, and that was a long time ago, right? Right. So congratulations for all that you've accomplished, sir. Anything else from anyone? Okay, seeing not, we are now going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. See you next week.